Good morning, councillors. The warmest of welcome at the Gisborne District Council. We've got our Sustainable Tairāwhiti meeting. As you can see, we have several colleagues online. Welcome, Councillor Pahurihuriwai and Councillor Cranston. But before we start, I'm going to ask Councillor Wharehinga to open with Karakia for us.
Thank you very much, Wish. Me noi tātou te whānau. E o ngā manu, tēnei te whakamui miti atu ki a koe mo tēnei hui a mātou. Arahina mai ki a u, ki te tika, ki te pono i a mātou, tuku a mai to wairua tapu hei manaki, hei awhi, hei tiaki hoki a mātou. Anei mātou e tūohu nēmu i tu aroa, a ka tuku i tēnei inui, i rongi i te ngoto mātou kai whakaora i Ukraiti. Amen.
Thank you for that. Okay, let's crack into business. It's a gorgeous sunny day out there, so let's talk apologies. I have Councillor Telfer, Councillor Tibble and Councillor Tupara, and I have Councillor Parata for lightness. And then we do have Councillor Cranston and Pahurihuriwai on audio link. I'm happy to move those apologies. Seconded by Councillor Wharehinga. All in favour? Aye. Contrary? Carried. I want to know any declarations of interest in regards to our agenda today. Nothing obvious, councillors. If you forget to declare an interest and we get to the paper, please then let us know. It is very important that if you have an interest that you do declare that. I am going to take you straight to page 5, which is a set of minutes, which Annie sent out quite some time ago. Please take a look. You've had the opportunity to read it. Is it a true reflection of what was discussed on that day? Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Ria. Seconded by Councillor Thompson. Any words of clarification? If not, all in favour? Contrary? Carried. Thank you for that. We go to our action register. There is a later date to our emissions reduction targets. Thank you for updating those dates. And then the PRMP update, which is Dr. Carr talking to us today.
So through you, Your Worship, those costs were included in the draft future development strategy, which the Council has already seen and approved to go out to consultation, so that
that's completed. One thing I wanted to ask is our friends who are going to come and talk to us, are they going to arrive when we talk about the paper?
Yes, we already have one person in the audience.
Dr. Liz, how are you? Good to see you. Are your team talking to us when we get to the paper? Yes. Fantastic. Thank you. You don't mind sitting in and listening to us? Fantastic. Thank you for being here today as well. I want to commend staff on the governance plans which we are receiving with each committee. It gives us a clear understanding of where we sit, what will be covered, when we will discuss what. Give us the opportunity to spot gaps and also to make sure from your perspective that everything is ticked off legislation-wise, but also what we promise in our work plan. So thank you for that. Councillors, any questions you would see in all our agendas now, which I really enjoy. We get a colour-coded governance work plan, which will give you a good idea of what is happening when and how it fits in with the work plans and the action plans. Ka pai? Okay, so today there's no leave of absence. Are there any acknowledgements or tributes that I'm not aware of? If not, our public input and petition deputations will come later when we cover our paper. I do not see any extraordinary business. We do not have notices of motion or adjourned business. So we are going to move to our very, very interesting agenda for today. I really enjoyed reading all of this. Something that is always a little bit controversial, but important for us to discuss is our local alcohol policy. Councillors, page 17. Kia ora, Joe. Thank you for joining us.
Kia ora, and we do have Makarand in the room, and I believe just going to say a few words of introduction as he's been working on this policy review. Do you want to come to the...
Move the chair right next to me. Come this way, Makaran. Makaran and myself have shared the stage before we went to a smoke-free policy, and the two of us tag team so we could sit next to each other. There we go. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. So the present report seeks Council's approval for adopting the statement of proposal and consultation on the new draft policy. Although it's not a mandatory thing to adopt a local alcohol policy, our council went ahead and adopted it in March 2018. And under the enabling legislation, which is the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, a local alcohol policy is required to be reviewed after every 6 years. So the review period for our current policy expires in March this year. Staff have developed a draft policy in consultation with the Inspectorate, the Te Whatu Ora, and the police, which is a requirement under the Act. And the draft policy covers 4 minor updates from our current policy, and these have been listed and explained from page 30.55 onwards. Also, as per the enabling legislation and the Local Government Act, Council is required to consult on the local alcohol policy before any changes are adopted, and so staff are proposing to consult between the 1st March and the 1st April on the policy.
Awesome. Thank you for that update. Joe, anything you wanted to add?
Not at this stage. The executive summary provides the key changes that are being proposed, and just a reminder that this is to adopt the statement of proposal for consultation so we can get feedback on those proposals.
Okay, councillors, I am going to open the floor just to set the scene. Remember, this is us giving staff the opportunity to go out and ask the public what they think, and then the hearings committee will ultimately listen to the proposals. I have Councillor Wharehinga, thank you, and then Councillor Ria.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm comfortable with us, as always. My top priority is us going out and asking our community what they think in regards to our policies, in regards to our strategies. I'm comfortable with us going out and doing this. I'm happy to move these recommendations. What I would like to say is, in regards to the reducing of operating hours for restaurants, cafes and wineries from 10 a.m. to 12 a.m. instead of 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. I'd really encourage our restaurant owners and our cafes and our wineries who hold licenses like that to please submit to this policy. That's what the whole point of this process is. We need to hear your guys' voices in regards to this decision. Also, we need our communities who have strong views in regards to what alcohol use looks like in our community to also submit as well. We need your public cordial in order to be able to structure a local alcohol policy that is actually local. So we really need that feedback, and I hope that can be conveyed via our live stream and also via our newspaper. Thank you very much.
Did you move this?
Yes.
Councillor Ria and then Councillor Foster.
I do approve to consult. I do have some concerns, and so my concerns sit around, one, the fact that if I look around the room, there are maybe 2 or 3 people that actually engage in these establishments at that time. So there's a definite youth voice missing from this. Also, as a parent of a 24-year-old, a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old, if they are given the opportunity to learn good coping strategies and mechanisms when they are at that age of going out into the public, and then they go off to university in somewhere like Auckland or Christchurch or Wellington, where the law actually says you can stay open till 5 o'clock in the morning, how can I then encourage them to learn these good behaviours at home home when that opportunity is not presented to them. When I quickly surveyed across my 24-year-old and a group of his friends, at 12 o'clock, they're not ready to go home. So they will go to a place, so then we're also taking them from a controlled, monitored area into different pockets of the community, actually possibly causing more work for our emergency services and our police when they decide at 12 o'clock, well, I actually haven't had enough and I'm going to go to someone's shed or to someone's house or to someone's balcony. So there's all those kinds of concerns. I would like for consultation that we do consider a Q code, because that's the generation who are using these places at those times, that there is, from memory of recollection, and to be quite honest, I haven't been out to town after midnight for a long time, but to have those Q codes up in those places where our rangatahi do frequent after 12 o'clock, so that those business owners can be involved in the people who actually use those facilities at that time having their say. So there's just a few things. I'm happy for it to go out in consultation, but I'm very aware that the rangatahi voice and the benefits for rangatahi might be missed through consultation because it's a process not accessible or not familiar to them. So I just wanted to make note of that. Kia ora.
Thank you for that. I have Councillor Foster, then Councillor Alder, then I have Councillor Cranston, then Councillor Parata, and then Councillor Gregory. I hope everyone remembers that. Let's go.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've got reservations with all these suggestions or these proposals. Maybe the fourth one I could live with, but first one, no new licences to be granted for Class A premises located with 150 metres of sensitive sites. I do note that there's at least 3 sensitive sites identified in the main street of our CBD. And I've got a question, what is our CBD for? The future of the CBD is its vibrancy and its restaurants and cafes and some bars. That's what CBDs are renowned for. And to be hindered by premises that are sensitive in the CBD, I question why are those sensitive sites there to start with. That's one. The next one is down to all the different proposals. Just bear with me for a sec. The class of the restaurants. There's 3 different classes, and they're kind of confusing. I go to a lot of restaurants around the place, and they serve alcohol. They may have a bar. What's the difference? If they've got a bar and they're a restaurant, they serve food. Why are we having to categorise 3 different classes of restaurants, cafes, and wineries? And then the hours. I mean, we've never had a problem with 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. before. You might have a wedding at a winery. You might have other different functions that might want to stay later than 12 o'clock. So why are we changing something that hasn't been a problem up until now? I just see some of these changes as because it's 6 years on. We better do some changes to this, and we're putting some ad hoc little decisions in that I don't think some of the community are going to be very happy with. So that's number 2. Optional C's external advertising at liquor stores. Well, hey, I don't see that much advertising going on out there that's going to hinder or encourage people to go and drink. If you want to have a place, any commercial business has advertising out front to advertise what it sells. So if a liquor store is going to advertise alcohol outside its shop, I should imagine it's got total entitlement to do so. So yeah, that's my concern. The fourth option, it's just identifying what the 3 classes of restaurants are and making them a bit more open to the public's view. But for me, I just don't see why we're even having classes of restaurants myself.
It's in the Act, Councillor, so it's not for us. It's not optional. It is in the local. It's in the Act. So
well, if it's in the Act, why are we now bringing it into the? Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, fair enough.
All good. Thank you for the lovely feedback. This is why I love democracy. We bring lots of different voices from our community, and this is exactly why we are here, to give feedback to staff who's worked, and then we go and ask the public, what do you think? And then we make informed decisions. So awesome, kōrero.
I just wanted to ask a point of order, Your
Yes, you can do a
Worship.
point of order.
Noting that this goes to the hearings committee after this, do members of the hearings committee then conflict themselves by giving their opinions about this?
That's the question we always ask. Who's on the hearings committee?
Also,
You know what? You should be able to listen with an open mind, still bring information from your own background, from your own education, from your own neighbourhood, from your own children, listen to the public and make an informed decision to then make a recommendation to the council. Mrs. Conn.
Absolutely correct.
Thank
If
you.
you make very bold statements about, I will not be supporting this.
So be open-minded, everyone. Hi. Okay, I'm moving on my list. I think Councillor Alder was next.
Agreeing with my two predecessors here, 100%. The proximity one is damaging businesses in town. I have to declare a conflict of interest. I do enjoy going to a bar.
Thank you for declaring that.
And I do feel we're being squeezed out. And if I'm declaring this conflict of interest, those on the other side that are pushing this, I ask them to declare any interests they may have. And the other thing, if this is going forward to the same committee that turned down jobs on Tairāwhiti Beach that had trouble getting
Just steer clear, my friend. You do
Okay.
know that sometimes we just need to be neutral with comments.
Well, I hope we do listen to the public.
Thank you for that is a nice clean statement. Okay, Councillor Cranston, you are next. Welcome from the South
Yeah,
Island.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sitting in a cafe in Motueka. Very nice. Yeah, about the restaurants, the problem with the Class 1 restaurant and sort of putting restrictions on that, what's the problem we're trying to solve? The problem is that they are using their restaurants in a way that really doesn't meet a definition of restaurant. So surely it would be better to go the other way and have some restrictions on them to have their restaurant not being operated as a bar, because we don't want to disencourage restaurants. As Councillor Foster was saying, restaurants are, I'm traveling around and just the restaurant industry is very important to the vibrancy of a town. And if we put restrictions on it like that, because some restaurants, and not all of them, are operating more like a tavern than a restaurant, surely we need to identify what a restaurant looks like, what a tavern looks like, and having those restrictions based on that, rather than just coming in and saying, well, Class 1 restaurants, they're operating like taverns, and so we're going to put a restriction on them when some of them probably aren't. So, yeah, that's my concern.
Thank you for your contribution. Next, I have Councillor Parata.
Morena tātou. I found this really interesting to read now that I suppose I'm an adult and thinking about alcohol and the impacts of alcohol in our region and our community and for our rangatahi. I can't help but feel we have an excessive amount of liquor stores available and I'll just talk candidly. When you go to a restaurant, when you go to a bar, when you go to a cafe and you drink alcohol, those are places that you behave. When you purchase alcohol and you take it away, that's usually where the problems are. They're not really in cafes, they're not really in restaurants, because it's expensive to drink there, so you moderate how you drink. I sort of echo the concerns for our CBD and our community. When visitors come here, they want to have a good time. When we come here from the coast, we also want to have a good time. And restaurants and cafes provide the opportunity and the environment to do so in a place that feels good. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I noted in the report that it shows that Te Tairāwhiti, our statistics for ED, alcohol-related incidences are less than the national average. I will say that there's some bad behaviour at ED. My sister is a emergency nurse at ED and has seen lots of bad behaviour. That's a cultural issue. That's about the way we use alcohol in the region. I don't think changing the policy is the way to address that. I think what Aubrey said is the way to address it, that we take more responsibility for our whānau members, what is cool, what isn't cool, and also encourage our rangatahi to participate in drinking in establishments. When I was young at university, I always told myself I knew I'd made it when I can drink in the restaurant because that costs money and I wouldn't need to preload. Well, you know, I think it's important that we talk real at this table, and if I'm the voice of rangatahi, you know, I think I should use their language. So that's it. So I really do think that we put this out to consultation. We let our region tell us what is or is not appropriate. I highly encourage, especially our rangatahi, to get involved in giving us their voice. Your voice, it matters, it counts. We want to hear what you think. And then also our establishments. I sort of echo the same sort of things that Councillor Foster's talking about. I couldn't quite tell the difference between, you know, the clusters. And yeah, I also think that liquor stores shouldn't be able to advertise for that same reason. I think that's where the issues are. But that's personal, and I think that we put that out to the region in consultation. However, I do think that we consult on a policy that doesn't have any changes to it, that people can tell us what they think about how it currently is, as opposed to the new changes. And lastly, if you close the bars at 12 o'clock, it will have an impact on the establishment. Rangatahi, young people, young professionals don't leave home till 11.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Councillor Parata. Councillor Gregory, you next.
Thank you. Firstly, page 21, fantastic to see the 2023 figures in there and statistics. And then page 22, when I look at those statistics, something really happened in 2008, or else the bar changed for whatever the questions were being asked, because we went on a big downward trend. I don't suppose anyone knows what happened in 2008.
Global financial crisis.
No one could afford to drink.
Right. But then on page 24, and I look at all of those stars, you can't really see what they are when you zoom in. And it's a real concern that so many of those stars, which are sensitive spots, all around where bars would be, and also, you know, like you've got the tab up by the hospital, must be a sensitive place as well. And so that is a concern, that how many of those sensitive places there are. Also, just on, on page 29, point 54, is that 2 a.m. typo?
2 a.m.
2 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
That's marked, sorry.
Yeah, that's all for now. Oh no, advertising. I agree that there shouldn't be advertising outside liquor stores. It's been proven in research what advertising does, and back when it's also been proven the harm that alcohol does in our community. And back when my grandmother was on council, she used to watch TV and write down every time she saw somebody with a glass of wine or a beer or an alcohol ad, to stop that from happening, to stop normalising the culture of drinking which has developed in this country from back then. And I don't think we've really made that much progress, but I certainly agree with stopping the ability to advertise alcohol. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution, Councillor Gregory. Councillor Robinson and then Thompson.
Thanks. So just on that issue of the advertising, the overriding legislation under section 77 of the Act, I couldn't actually find anywhere in there which allows us to affect advertising, and it's quite specific about that an LAP must not include policies on matters not relating to licensing. But when I searched for the term advertising, which appeared 33 times in legislation, I actually couldn't find anywhere relating to what we're proposing here. So I want to make sure that we're actually legally able to do that. But I totally agree with Councillor Gregory. We all know from the change in alcohol sponsorship and tobacco sponsorship in the 80s, how that has actually justifiably reduced uptake of product and participation. And you know, we know we're liquor stores, we don't need to have lots of images of alcohol and normalising alcohol on the outside to know it's a liquor store. So I would support the ban on advertising proposed in this paper, but I just want to make sure we're legally able to do it. The paper itself really made me sit and stop and wonder what we're trying to achieve. We know the damage alcohol does in our community. I worked as a criminal lawyer for 22 years and I've driven clients to alcohol counselling services. I've sat and looked at a charge sheet for a guy who's 60 years old and he's got 14 pages of charges. The first charge was inevitably drinking as a minor, drinking in a public place. Alcohol featured regularly through most of my clients offending, and we have a major drinking culture issue in this country. That's an understatement. How we achieve reducing harm in our community, and we know Te Tairāwhiti features in all the wrong statistics, and alcohol is no less. How we reduce that harm is this is only part of a bigger journey and a bigger picture. We should be able to have people go out and enjoy a night out and have a drink responsibly to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning. But I sit there and I ask myself, well, am I really sensibly, responsibly drinking at 4 or 5 in the morning in a restaurant? No, I'm not. And I've certainly had numerous clients who have gone from that side of the river over to this side of the river before the police have intervened, and they've absolutely been drunk and intoxicated, and how they have been served and been fed more alcohol by our bars on the way from the journey from Lone Star or wherever over to Sugar has always mystified me, because clearly you cannot serve an intoxicated person. That's where part of our problem lies. Our industry still serves people who are clearly intoxicated because they get drunk in town at bars to the point where they cause social harm and harm to themselves. So, what to do? Put it out for consultation, encourage as many people to participate. I do believe reducing the hours reduces exposure and accessibility, and that can only be a good thing. One of the statistical statements I think is missing something. I just want to take you to the page. Page 23, paragraph 23 on page 23 says, when compared to the New Zealand average, Gisborne has more on-licensed alcohol retailers per 100. Is that just what greater than the New Zealand average? I just wonder what the statement.
Yes, greater than the average. So you've got the 2 columns in the table, one being the New Zealand average.
The other thing is the issue of sensitive sites. You know, it's a really interesting, almost like a cultural throwback. You can't have a pub near a church, you can't have a pub near a school. But statistically or from a rationale perspective, does having a pub near a school encourage children to drink, or does having a pub near a church encourage people to drink? I don't know the answer, but the use of sensitive sites as a rationale for not having a bar or not having a restaurant is, I think, quite... it's unclear, and I don't think there's a clear rationale for it. We've just had a new Surf Life Saving Club open in Midway, and we've got a restaurant that serves alcohol right above it. We've got the tab opposite the hospital. What impact is that having on people drinking irresponsibly? I don't know. So I'm really uncertain about the use of sensitive sites as the rationale for not having a licensed premises. I think that's probably a very aged rationale, maybe something from the 60s or 70s on a different value system. And I don't think it's maybe pertinent or so relevant today. And that does cause me concern, particularly because I don't think we can justify it in this paper. I don't think the rationale is justifiable, and therefore it's not justifiable here. It's not defendable from a community's perspective. So those are my points. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Thompson, lucky last.
Yeah, I totally agree with what's been said so far. Yeah, most of the points made are points I was going to make. Rather than repeat that. The only other thing is I'm just wondering what steps are being made so that current licence holders are aware of these proposed changes, and if they're fully aware of how to make a submission. Also with that,
Yeah, I want the submissions to actually be heard and have an impact on the outcome, because it doesn't seem like the submissions have been heard properly in the past and have affected the outcome. That's two other points.
So thank you for that. Joe?
So through you, Your Worship, yes, we can definitely make sure we contact all those existing licence holders, and you'll note in the resolutions we've noted that they will conduct public hearings so people will have an opportunity to be heard and speak to the hearings.
Last comment, Councillor Robertson, and then I am going to try and wrap it up. Yep, Councillor Ria. Anyone that wants to, do not say anything that you have said before. If you want to speak again, say something new or different or valid, and then I might give you a chance. Go, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I missed out two things. In the actual draft policy on page 45, clause 3.1.1, I wonder if that should start with subject to clause 3.1.2, just from a drafting perspective. And clause 3.1.2 talks about the signage will have no significant impact on sensitive sites. And I'm wondering, should that not be no significantly detrimental impact? Because a significant impact is not necessarily detrimental impact. So I wonder whether there should be no significantly detrimental impact. That's 3.1.2 on page 46.
Councillor Ria, lucky last.
Just along the lines of sensitive sites, that was given as a very highly featured rationale, but then the increase in hours were reflective of the end time rather than the start time. When the start time is at 10 a.m, which that is when actually the sensitive sites are open and being used, not at 2 a.m. So that I thought that if sensitive sites was the core, which it came across in the paper, then the reduction should happen at the earlier side of the sale of alcohol rather than the later side when sensitive sites aren't being utilised at 2 a.m. in the morning. Kia ora.
Okay, I am going to give it a go. So first I'm going to take you on a little journey for those of you that were not on council. It makes me feel like old Nana Stoltz when I do this. But 6 years ago, I'll just talk you through what happened then. So we didn't have a lap, and it was a first process for us. So it did have the default hours for our community, which was 8 a.m. till 4 a.m, and then also 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. for off licenses. So that was the first time that we really tightened up and changed. And there was a lot of pushback, especially I remember from supermarkets saying, we open till 10 o'clock, now at 9 o'clock we need to barrier off, and what's the justification? So there was a long journey in there as well, and quite a bit of pushback, but in the end we moved it back from the 4 a.m. to the 2 a.m. What I've heard today is that councillors, or what I've heard around the table, are relatively happy with what we agreed on in our original lap. What staff has done with consultation, Ministry of Health, what's required of them when we review the lap is to make new or different recommendations. What we are saying is, and lots of different opinions here today, and I want to make another proposal that maybe all of council listen to the hearings moving forward, and I'll ask Joe and Nadine about that. But what I've heard today is make it clear when we go out to consult what we currently have, what the status quo is, what the changes are. Keep it simple, because people will just be confused when you talk about, I can barely remember, the different classes and what it means for people. Use examples that are real to people. Make sure we talk to rangatahi. Someone said use a QR code to make sure they also, because they are the ones using it. We are at home drinking our herbal tea, so it is good to go out and make sure we do ask the people that are affected, because in the end of the day, and also aside from the rangatahi and our younger generation, the owners of establishments and how they experience it, because we have had input from police, we've had input from the Ministry of Health. And then I was just going to test councillors and see your input, what you think about all of council. It's such an important thing, and I think last time all of council did listen to it, and I'm just wondering how people feel the councillors that wanted to be involved, we do it at all of council hearing. Joe, any opinion in that regard? Just gives us a
To do that, that's not a problem.
Good. So if councillors are happy with that approach, what we are agreeing on today is to go out and consult, but the feedback is make very clear people know the status quo and what differences we are proposing, the justification for that, keep it simple, consult with our young ones as well as the owners, and then we will have all of council.
So we'd no longer need resolution 2.
No. So we'll just come to, should we have a recommendation in there that a committee of councillors will, doesn't matter. Is our mover happy with moving number 1? Yep. Any other comment or query? I don't want to shut down the discussion, but I think we had a good thrashing and staff got a clear direction. You want to add any more, or you're happy with the feedback you've received?
Yes, just to clarify one point, so the proposed change in hours, and it's just a proposal at this stage, we're not proposing that it applies to the likes of sugar and taverns. It was limited to the cafes and restaurants, just to clarify that point for anyone listening. But yeah, looking forward to that feedback.
One thing I wanted to comment, and I forgot, if you go out, we had guests from France and I wanted to eat out on Monday night.
Good luck.
Good luck to you. So, but what I'm trying to say, no restaurant, if you're not there before 7:30 to put your order in, you're drinking your wine at home. So when we were talking about limiting restaurants, are we really looking into a place where they're not really open after 10 or 10:30? Just food for thought. Those are the establishments that do close relatively early, and we should take that into account as well. Anyway, do I have a seconder for, thank you, Councillor Parata. We have moved by Councillor Wharehinga, seconded by Councillor Parata. All in favour? Aye. Carried for that. Thank you, Makaran. I really appreciate the work you've done. Thank you, Joe, for that. Okay, councillors, we will move to our second, which also is a very interesting piece of work, our draft financial strategy. And you would have seen this in different forms and shades and colours. Infrastructure first. I just testing you to see if you're awake. Yep. So page 49, councillors. Welcome, Charlotte. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for the work you've put into this. So Charlotte and Joe, I'll open the floor, and then we'll open the floor to councillors for their contribution. So councillors, page 49, and we are talking about the infrastructure strategy, also just including that in our consultation going forward.
So the infrastructure strategy is part of the 3-year plan process. This infrastructure strategy, for those that were around previously, I'll just clarify, this only looks at 3 years, not 30 years like we normally do. And so the dollars and the costs and the projects that are in this particular strategy just cover that 3 years. Yeah, it should, as you can see, it is quite heavily dominated by recovery in terms of, I guess, the spend and the list of projects under the specific issues, but there is still projects to progress around the other infrastructure issues around the environment, Te Taio, and also Future Ready, which encompasses a lot of things such as growth, economic development, resilience, etc., etc. And some of the recovery things, just to note, also address, I guess, resilience and their adaptation as well. That was landed in that bucket rather than Future Ready. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Charlotte. Yes, the document is self-explanatory, and I'm very happy that it is recovery focused, because that is what we want to focus on in the next 3 years. Councillors, I'm going to open the floor. Joe, anything you wanted to add?
No, nothing further from me. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson, you've got your hand up.
Yep, great, thank you. Big piece of work. When I read it, I was really looking for some sort of visionary corridor around our climate change not our response and not our resilience, but our actual zero emissions and our pathway to what we're doing. So instead of having a smarter ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, what we were doing to not get to the cliff. And I could really only find 2 paragraphs in the entire document which really touched very lightly on this, which was paragraph 30. System transitions to reduce our emissions and respond to the impacts of climate change, including deployment of low or zero emission technologies, reducing changing demands for infrastructure, design and access. And page 68, which said we've resolved to take a leadership position on climate change, particularly in response to significant climate threats. Really, this is too light, in my opinion, as a guiding document. I know it's limited for the next 3 years. I know we've got a recovery focus, but it doesn't have enough in it. Encouraging, guiding, and reminding us that we have to still transition our business, and this is only to do with council assets, owned and operated by council, that we still have a leadership role and a responsibility in that region, in that realm. And I just don't think it is enough in there. Not 2 paragraphs and 90 odd pages.
Thank you for that. Any other kōrero? Councillor Parata.
Thank you very much for a real pragmatic, it just seems really pragmatic, the approach to this, that we definitely can't do all the things we wish we could do, because that's just not where we're at right now. It also acknowledges a lot of things we don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty around decisions, particularly around Three Waters and recovery and climate change. And I feel like this report does a really good job in kind of outlining that, but we still need to move forward. So so ngā mihi for that. One of my main concerns about consultation is when the information we provide to community is so challenging to navigate through. My suggestion is, because it's really important, the stuff in this plan, and the priorities seem like appropriate priorities as far as I'm concerned. I would suggest that when you go to community, that there's a summary document that doesn't have that level of detail. Oh, she's waving it because she's so clever. Yes, just because I think it's so important that people can, it's not their jobs to read the plan, but it's our job. We have to do it. If it's not your job, you're not paid to do it. I almost guarantee you wouldn't do it. So that's that. The other thing I just had a question about was in regards to, 2 things. One, I think communities facilities should stay as a priority, because it is a priority regardless of whether or not we can do all of the things we hope or want to do, but those are things that bring wellness, joy to communities, and that's why it's worth living here and not just visiting. So that's, I think, is an infrastructure priority. But the second thing I just wanted to get clarity on was around water storage, because I know we're hoping, wanting, aspirationally manifesting the repairs to our water systems, which absolutely is a priority, especially for the township. We know what happened in Gabriel, and we don't want to see that ever happen again. And that's a huge investment. What I want to know is, does the water storage project program thoughts, does it extend to the beginning conversations that we had up the coast and around access to clean drinking water?
Comment on that, Joe or Charlotte?
Not quite sure what the question is. So at the moment, in the current infrastructure strategy and approach, there is the focus of our water supply is very much in the Gisborne urban area, as you know, in terms of the water treatment plant. I think if we were looking at extending the reticulation or providing more services, that's going to be a question for outside this 3-year infrastructure strategy.
Let me just re-say my question then, because I think I've said it in a way that nobody understands what I'm talking about. So no, I'm not asking for town supply outside of the city centre. About 3 or 4 years ago, there was some conversations in and around water access. Whakarua was one of them, and there was another conversation up in Matakawa. Those 2 things have been stopped because no money is always the problem. What I want to know is, are those 2 projects coming in as part of this infrastructure conversation? And if not, Why not? And if not, please.
Or is it part of BAU going forward? That's, you know, is it
Or
happening?
Is it being considered anywhere?
Where is it?
Yeah. Thank you.
So, in terms of, I guess, the specific projects, they are not in the 3-year list, those two that you've just mentioned. Pauline is relieved.
One of the main things that we said to have future focus is what do we need to have and where do we need to have it. One, it was in the water supply, and the other part was in the roading network. That kind of strategic outlook of our region, while it may be focusing on our water supply for the city, could also have that wide lens across the region of what that may be. So it probably fit in that part of work, but I'm happy to, if Nadine has anything else to add.
Through your worship, that's absolutely right in terms of the strategic kind of bigger picture overview, because we've got to still do some work around affordable waters done well, and there was further work to be done around the water demand work that Joe and the team have brought to council for discussion. So whilst not specifically mentioned over the 3-year horizon, it's certainly something that will be bubbling away from a strategic perspective.
Can I have a supplementary?
You can have a supplementary question.
Okay, well, I understand that, and I understand the logic behind it. Can I suggest an immaterial addition then? Can there be a sentence that says that we look at, we consider, we think about access to clean drinking water
For
our rural areas? So we know that when there's opportunity to jump, we can, but it's not that it's not being considered by this council. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Butt. I have our screen participants next, Councillor Cranston, then Councillor Pahuru-Huriwai, and then Councillor Wharehinga.
Yeah, thanks for that. Pretty much a follow-on from Councillor Parata, and that's about prioritisation, really. I know we're going to have enormous workload in front of us and enormous dollar requirement. So we're, and each of the councillors is kind of going to have different thoughts on priority. So how do we get the absolute priority clarification in our heads about what we can do? And at the end of the day, some things may have to drop off. So yeah, those are some pretty robust discussions required on that prioritisation about what's next and what's in and what's out. Cheers.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pahuru-Huriwai, welcome.
Morena tātou. Thank you for the paper, Charlotte and Joe, and just want to add my whakaako. When I was looking at the 4 main areas over the next 3 years, so Te Taiao, recovery, future ready, and affordability, I just can't see a lot of a reflection there in the coast. Doesn't seem to be. There's a lot of work going on around the region, but very little coming north of Uawa. So there's a little statement somewhere about and townships and rural townships, but very little of any substance, in my opinion. I just picked up on the, and I guess I just thought about the seems to be about recovery, but no acknowledgement that there is likely to be more significant weather events and what happens when those weather events happen. I just can't see that reflected in the paper, and I wonder if we're pulling the wool over our eyes to not have it included. What's our plan B if we get hit by another cyclone, the tsunami that we're expecting over the next 50 years arrives, or we have an earthquake, that flattens us? What is the plan? I just can't see that. And just a little spelling on page 67. It should be Ngai Tāwhiti, I think, not Ngāti Tāwhiti. And there's another little one on page 107 or 8 under, should say improve, I think, the little spelling there. But sorry, that's just my eyes and pick up little things like that. Yeah, and just the one final thing was just if I can get some more information, and I'm sure it's somewhere in all of our documents, about the landfill expiry of the Waiapu and Te Araroa which happens next year. I know I've seen it somewhere. I just would like to lay my hands on it to get a bit more information about that, as whānau up this end of the coast will want to know more about that to be able to give some feedback. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll just respond through the chair to the question around the recovery aspects of the infrastructure, or managing other major events. But firstly, just in terms of your infrastructure strategy, it outlines the significant infrastructure that you have in aspects like your three waters, your roading, any major facilities. So there is a specific list that councils are required to provide for, and then you can opt to include community facilities in terms of the infrastructure challenges. So what we've identified in there is the key challenges for us in terms of affordability, but also recovery. So right up the front of the document, it outlines that these are the considerations that we go through. In terms of our response around how we manage that, those are found in other plans. So our emergency management plan, our business continuity plans, and our disaster recovery plan. So you won't find that in the infrastructure strategy, you'll get that in other areas. But what we have done is linked at a high level that this is the challenge overall for the next 3 years for our infrastructure management, consequences, choices and funding.
Okay, thank you. Just supplementary to that then, and in support of Councillor Parata's whakaaro about when you come out to community to consult, that information is rendered down and simplified, but also that those things, what you've just said, there's other plans, and this plan is not part of that, or it's connected, but so there's a whole lot of different documents that we're privy to that our community might or might not see or even worry about reading. But when we go out to consultation, that it is understandable by Joe Public. I like the one page, the diagram that you have on page 52 as an example of the strategy and what it looks like, but and maybe just more that type of a thing as we come out to consult with whānau, so that we get their best feedback. Kia ora koutou. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wharehenga.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I've a couple of things. One also in the lane of what Councillor Parata brought up in regards to consultation. I'm really interested, and this is to the paper that comes back to us on the 14th of March around consultation. So I'd really like to see how what the plan is, so that our community can still dream big, but in line with what Councillor Cranston had said around our issues of prioritisation, that there is still, I guess, a managing of what we can and cannot do. Because I already feel like if we went out to our community and we said, hey, infrastructure, what do you reckon? They will say everything. Every road, every pothole, every water pipeline, everything, which we want our community to be able to do. We want them to have unfettered voice in regards to this process, but also there is a responsibility on us to be, I guess, responsible for the conversation that we have, because sometimes when we've had those kind of bigger conversations, and I take us back to, say, other community assets that we've had, the conversations with the communities have been here, and our ability to deliver on those conversations have actually been more kind of around out here, which is just the reality of being a small region, small ratepayer base. That's just our reality. So I'm really keen on hearing how that will go on the 14th of March. I'd also like, in line too, similarly in line with the point around water at the parks up the coast, if we're able to carve out some space for kind of community-based infrastructure. I know that this is about our council infrastructure, but there have been under this current government that is tightening its belt and making 6.5 to 7.5% reductions inside there. Usually what's common is that we start having conversations about things like public-private partnerships, etc., etc. And I've heard from the community that especially our rural-based community, that they're really keen on water storage solutions for themselves that actually council's able to partner with them on. What I'm talking about is something that Councillor Pahuri has brought up before, is water tanks for whānau that council are leading, able to connect and get bulk or whatever, and they also pay for that back off their rates or whatever. I don't want to predispose what that may be, but are we able to carve out some kind of opportunity for our community to actually have that conversation about kind of community-based or them-based infrastructure during this consultation process?
Through your worship, one of the things that we've been clear on right through in terms of building blocks for the 3-year recovery plan is that we can only do so much. And one of the things we also said is that we wouldn't be engaging or including any additional programs or projects of work unless they were externally funded and that there was sufficient resources to do that. Having the conversation requires the resources and commitment to be able to carry that through, right? So you don't want to set up some expectations and then we're not able to deliver on that. So provides for some resources to enable us to do that and step into this space, and then absolutely we can include it if that's what you're all talking about. So like if there is normally you'd bubble up from the community, they'd have done most of that work, and then there's a point where we need a resource there to make that happen. So if that's what you're kind of referring to when we get to that stage, then we would need to resource that because we haven't accommodated for additional projects like that in this 3-year plan.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about creating the space for the community to be able to give us that kōrero in order for us then to be obligated to do something about it. Because I do hear it, and I have heard it, and others of our councillors have heard this, but that's why I was asking specifically about carving out that space inside that consultation process in order to be able to do it.
And through the chair, if I can add, we're not the only organisation or entity that can initiate these conversations. Like we will lean into iwi because I know that's a priority in that space, and try and enable what might be if it's funding or whatever else. But whether we lead it is the other question, given our enormous our program that we've got on, just a question around prioritisation.
Yeah, 100%. Whether we lead it or not, the community view us as an important cog, I guess, in the solutions that they need. So thank you very much for expressing the line, but also the possibilities around it.
It's your turn. I know we have rules about only talking once, but I do have a question. And I also just wanted to support Madam C's point about us not being the be-all, end-all of every conversation. But I do have a question around the. Are there laws? Yes. Are there laws around how we have to manage consultation? And I ask that because is there a way that potentially we could be doing it better? For example, and just tell me if this is possible or not possible. For example, what happens if we tell the community, here are the priorities, here's 10 imaginary dollars. We've given figures to these particular things, spend your 10. You know what I mean? Like, is there a way to just simplify it down so they realise that we can only have 4 of the 8 priorities?
We can't afford everything.
Yeah, but I don't think that people understand that, and the reason I say that also is because when I look at the financials of it, I have to read the context in order to understand what the number means, because I have never seen $2 million. I don't know what it is. I can't make my brain.
What can it buy you?
Exactly, I can't make my brain understand it. So when you see things that you cannot understand, it just comes straight through you and you don't feel it, you don't understand the gravity of it. I wonder if there are ways that we can slim it down almost into a game of some kind, that anyone could play that game and put their priorities on
and understand it.
And understand it would make sense if we, added points to it or something, so they could mentally spend it, and we could accept that as a potential submission.
I'm going to, through the chair, I'll get Anita to respond in terms of what we could do by way of workshops. But one thing I want to say is that in an ordinary long-term plan process, we would have had early engagement, and early engagement would have been the opportunity to do that facilitation and workshops to identify what are the community's priorities, and are we having the right conversation when we get to this stage of the consultation document. And in the past we've done that and identified, like walking and cycling was number one. This is what we wanted. We haven't had the opportunity to do it at this stage. That's not, up to Anita in terms of what we do this consultation.
Through the chair, that is the ideal process that we do follow. We do have a more engaging process through the early engagement, and there are a variety of tools that can be used in that process to help us to then target down to what is an actual priority for the community. But in this long-term, for this 3-year plan, it is a different proposition. And I think just in general, it is a more conservative approach in terms of how we consult, but the consultation document hopefully allows us to simplify it to a level that is accessible for all.
Thank you. I'm happy to move it.
A second.
Thank you for that. Any other? Councillor Alder.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've actually got a checklist of questions which I'd like to go through, but my first question is, what is the significance of this document not being audited? And how does that mean we have to be more careful about how we set it up in the first instance? Who was going to check it anyway?
That's a very good question, Your Worship, Councillor, and I'm going to ask Pauline to respond.
Thank you, Pauline.
So we approach it as though it is audited. So if any of the numbers that come through from Charlotte, I will take it through, is that that has to marry up to how it actually worked within the process itself. The second part of it, we have to report on it, and reports will be actually audited there, so the auditors will be interested in it. The third part of it is unofficially, we give the documents to our auditors, and while we've got them in draft, if they come back with additional feedback and saying, okay, we would take that into consideration. So while it's not audited per se from the beginning to end, we approach this as though it will be audited, and then everything that we are putting in here has evidence base to support that it's reasonable, fair and reasonable.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to wear something on my own shoulders. I feel if it's not been externally audited, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that it's internally audited and correct. So going to my checklist, starting on page 76, which is the Waipoa $29.6 million, I'm assuming that's on top of what's already been spent, and declaring a big conflict of interest. I am a farmer. I do farm on the banks, or I'm affected by the TRI. I also have lots of associates who are struggling with dying vines, dying trees, and who would like to expand and would like irrigation. So just on this one alone, the Waipoa catchment includes the TRI, and I would like to see it being included in some of the expenditure that is going into flood protection. The flood on the TRI would arguably be the biggest amount of damage in the smallest area that we had during the last flood. Next point is urban stormwater, 10 million. In this document, there is no mention of drainage of the flats. And we've already discussed that that is a priority. And again, this town survives on our productive flats. If they go down, we'll go down. Jumping ahead to page 79, the dam resilience and water source resilience, $1.3 million spend. I just hope we're still investigating some cheaper options up there with seeding of Mānuka. Every dollar's going to count as we go forward. Tree planting, streets, tree planting, page 81. A great idea. There's nothing can cool a street faster than a tree plantation. What's our policy on cutting trees down? I know a whole lot have disappeared, and I just wonder if the community gets enough of a say in that. As a comment. Page 82, Wainaki Transformation Program, 5.8 million over the next 3 years. I presume this is part of the $5,000 per hectare that is transitioning from pine trees to native, which again is extremely expensive. And what is the long-term budget here? Because if this is this never ending? Does it have an end point? Within that description, I noticed that we are spending money on job training and in fact job creation. And I really question, is that our role? Are we part of that, or is that not a government function? To job train and create jobs. 4.3 million on page 82, 4.4 million on drain-wise. This has been ongoing, trying to stop water going into the bay. Again, is this going to be finished after 3 years, or is this another ongoing bill that we have to front up with? I'll skip that one. Page 86. And again, it's just the tone of this parts of this document. We're talking about the importance of developing flats, and there's mention of honey production and medicinal cannabis production. Both of them actually probably very low impact on infrastructure. The future of these flats here is high production, gold kiwi, apples, and other new crops around the corner. And that should be our focus, not medicinal cannabis, which...
How many questions to go, Councillor?
Not too far.
Right. But lots of those are just statements, so there are a few questions that are being asked, but...
The last one is page 88. Is Kiwa Pools spending 6.5 million on enhancing an area. I would just like to see that money held back until we see the possibility.
Isn't that external funding one?
Through your worship, that's our commitment that we made in order to unlock the $40 million that was provided by central government.
Thank you.
So there's no getting out of that.
Thank you for some questions, some opinions, and this is exactly why we're going out to consultation, to make sure people also have that level of... Just coming back to pruning trees and the policies, it's on the website, so you can go and take a look there if you just go on the Western District Council website. Just while we were sitting here, we were bringing it up. So in order for you to see the policies that are being...
On street trees.
Removal and pruning. So you can go and take a look there. Are there any, there were so many questions, I'm sure, is there one or two that you wanted an answer on? Because most of the questions that I picked up were, when is the funding, when is it going to stop? It's a 3-year, is it ongoing like the drain-wise? So it's, at this stage, like drain-wise was in our 10-year plan, so there's a commitment.
Drain-wise and the Wainaki.
Yes, and Wainaki. So can we have a comment on Wainaki? Thank you.
So through you, your chair, yes, that will be an ongoing program. Like any land manager, you do need to maintain your land, whether that be pest control or fencing, there will be maintenance costs. Obviously, they're not going to be at that significant scale while we're going through this revegetation process, but there will be ongoing costs like there is with maintaining any of our land holdings. Through you, chair, I think another question you had was around Tiarai. So Tiarai is one of the FOSL areas, so that comes within on page 77. It's not specifically listed because there are a number of FOSL areas.
Thank you.
Supplementary.
Yes.
Would we be able to get a budget on future spend for the Wainaki? Can we ask for that?
That's already We do have it.
It does come in the it does go from the operations, but just to give you an indication, for the replanting, which is the biggest cost, we had over 10 years, and that was 18 million. Then when it came into the first 31 long-term plan, in which we had about 35% external funding with it. So yes, you will have heavily weighted as the areas have been harvested. In those first 3 years, there's significant cost to establish them, and then it reduces down to a maintenance level thereafter.
Okay, this paper was moved by Councillor Parata. This is to go out with our consultation, that people that are interested, not everyone's interested, can get the granular levels of information that they, but it's also a reassurance for councillors that our teams are across what we said we want to commit to for 3 years. This is not a 10-year or a 30-year infrastructure budget that we usually do. So thank you also to the team. Charlotte has furiously been taking notes, so there will be some updates. I do want to ask councillors like Councillor Pahuru-Huriwai, if you picked up a little typo or something that you want clarity on, you can email Nadine and she will pass it on to Charlotte or Joe, just to make sure if you have any supplementary contributions you do want to make. But it was moved by Councillor Parata and seconded by myself. All in favour, contrary, coffee.
Just before we end that, sorry, I just want to make a note about council consultation calendar. We have previously talked about, consultation fatigue with our community. That there be a, like how we had the calendar that depicted the movements of governance, that within the organisation, possibly, Nadine, that there's an overall how and when you're going to engage with the community, so that not one community is getting hit a Monday, a Wednesday and a Friday all in the same week. And also, I did mention it at the end of the last meeting, but on the 6th and 7th of April at the AMP Showgrounds is the regional Tamararo qualifying national competition. There will be 400 local performers, Māori, and there'll be a crowd of over 1,000, with probably around about 250 people coming from out of the district. If you want to meaningfully engage with a large amount of Māori who live in this community, Tamararo would be the best time to do it. And all that would take is to contact the organiser through the Tairāwhiti Cultural Development Trust. Kia ora.
Thank you for that. Councillors, let's break for a coffee and come back in 15 minutes' time. All right, thank you. Policy. And then we will end our day with inviting Manu and his team. So let's work through our policy, and then I just want to have a quick catch-up afterwards when we have our lunchy lunch. If there's a lunchy lunch, I think there is.
There's a lunchy lunch.
Yeah. So what I'm going to ask next is that we all go to page 130. So what we are talking about now is our draft financial strategy. So we have just covered our infrastructure strategy. So as part of our legislation, we have certain documents that we have to take out to the community to consult on for our 3-year recovery plan, or in the past, our 10-year plan. So this is just another tool that we use, and which you will have seen everything in here. It's several workshops, but today is the opportunity just for staff to check that we're all on the same page, and that we then take it out to community, to our community to consult. So Pauline, do you want to lead us in this discussion, or Nadine?
I'll hand over. So through your worship, so the financial strategy, like your infrastructure strategy and the other policies that you've adopted over the course of our engagement around the 3-year plan, is another significant piece of the jigsaw. Your infrastructure strategy and your financial strategy must talk to one another. So where we've identified significant challenges in our infrastructure space, we need to have provided through your financial strategy some logical connection to address that. In terms of the financial strategy, it is high level, but it does set your financial limits, so your debt cap and rates. And then it also sets out the strategies that we're going to try and take to address some of our significant challenges over the next 3 years.
much what Nadine has summed up is what is taking you on that journey. The financial strategy is also trying to make sure that you say what is the context that you're entering into your next 3 years. It's trying to say what is it that we are facing, what is it that we need to do, and then is where do we expect to be by the end of those 3 years. And it does it through saying the same levers, which is Dean has mentioned. What is your funding mechanisms that you have available to you, and both in terms of your overall debt rates, which you must be stated as a maximum within your by legislation that is required. So that an overall picture from the beginning to the end. But I'm happy to take any questions that you might have with regards to the strategy itself.
Relatively straightforward, councillors, because we have discussed this several times, but I do want to open the floor. If you have any other questions, I want to make sure you ask those, but we have worked through this several times, so I can understand if people don't have questions. Councillor Alder.
Thank you. Just two quick questions. Identifying significant issues, page 130. At what time should we be considering this government's intention of doing 7.5% cuts? And should we be introducing that and thinking about it at this stage?
I'll respond as you go along,
yes,
Councillor Albert, through your worship. So in terms of the 7.5% cuts, is that in terms of the public sector cuts that are required to be made operationally?
Yeah, so do they flow through?
No, they do not.
They don't. Okay, thank you. That's, and then just the next question on 168 is the council's 50% share of 30 million. Are we going to have to update that figure at some point? And again, should we be updating it sooner rather than later?
Are you talking about the 63 properties?
The 63 properties.
Yeah, so that's ongoing. Yeah, that's ongoing.
Yeah. So that will be updated?
As we get, yes.
Yes, we know.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm happy to move the document.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Councillor
I'll move it, I'll second it. We've been through this quite a lot, so
thank you for that. Any other questions or queries in this regard? Otherwise, I'm going to put it to the floor, and what we are agreeing today is that we will take this document, and it's available to our community to see the justification, where we get our money from, how we plan to work, or not our money from, their money, and how we plan to look after it. So it's meeting the costs and then maintaining our core services and also protecting our environment in a financially sustainable way. All in favour? Contrary? Carried. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our friends in the back. Manu, Harley, Dr. Loomis, your team here today. Thank you for sitting through our meeting. And Manu, you were part of some of these discussions before.
No, I know, it's nothing to do with me.
I'm going to put it straight at your... You want us to move out of the way? I can move away.
Yeah, move away.
Yeah, I'll move away and then you can take the whole front. It's much easier, and then this whole space is open for you. But I am taking my coffee. There is no that. Okay, we go. Good morning, how are you? Good morning, and the warmest of welcome while I shuttle out of here. Please make yourselves at home, and we look forward to listening and then having some questions afterwards. So Manu, I'll leave it up to you to introduce.
Harley will do that.
Good, Harley, thank you.
Great. Kia ora, everyone. Thanks for having us. We have Joe's done a wonderful cover report, so I'll take that as read. And I'm just going to do a quick introduction so you're aware of this deliberative democracy project. We're at a key stage in the project. We're completing phase 1 and we're about to move forward into phase 2 of the project. So phase 1 was a community kind of led
approach to understanding, I actually might just stop because I don't want to steal Terry's thunder. So we're going to have Terry presenting on the key findings of the Phase 1 report, and then if there are any kind of burning questions, go for it, but we'll then move relatively quickly on to a presentation from Christian Allen and Barsley from Koitu, and that's the Centre for Informed Futures and they're from Koitu, the Centre for Informed Futures at Auckland University. And then we'll have time at the end for questions. So thanks for your time, and I'll hand it over to Terry.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for inviting us back. Well, we're back, let's put it that way. Now they're back. You commissioned us to do some work, and so we're coming back. You have the report, you have a summary of what was in the report with some of the significant, I think, conclusions at the end. I'm going to go over highlighting some of the main, what we thought were some of the important or standout insights from the interviews in 3 communities, based on 6 questions that we asked during the interview. So that's basically my task. Let me quickly overview the project just as a getting a running start. The purpose of the overall project, which we decided in consultation with staff would be rolled out in 2 phases over an 18-month period. The first phase being with the purpose to document examples of how communities are recovering from the cyclone and what they're doing, if anything, to plan and adapt and think about transitioning toward a more resilient future. That was a community-based focus. The second phase was to organize and trial a deliberative Tairāwhiti citizen assembly, or similar sort of deliberative exercise, maybe more than one, to identify ways of supporting community-led decision-making around adaptation. A bigger picture about climate action for communities, perhaps. So phase 1, the community case studies, we carried out interviews in 3 focus communities, and I sort of was the lead guru, if you will, and helped analyze some of the findings, and I helped train interviewers who were selected from the community, from these various communities. We selected 3 communities based on 7 criteria, which are spelled out in the back of the report if you want to see what those criteria were. The communities that interviews were carried out in were Huriwai, Matakawa, and Gisborne City Disability Community. It was a team of about 5 local researchers with I involved as well at various stages. We carried out a total of 47 interviews. Okay, selected findings. And again, I'm going to highlight the 6 key questions that focused the interviews as our team went around. The first question was, again, we're talking about communities and how they can themselves start thinking about adapting to climate change and all the impacts. So first of all, we wanted to know from people what works in promoting and sustaining participation in adaptation planning and in action. And the first one was basically to recognize and utilize local, existing local skills. The point of that insight from people was people feel more recognized and more likely to be involved and have a sense of contributing if they're actually involved in making a difference in the project. And secondly, the suggestion was to use personal networks and social media to spread the word about climate change and the importance of preparing so people have more of an interest in being involved in planning for the future. And finally, to look for a committed group. In other words, not just go fresh into a community and say we ought to do something, but where there's a committed group who's got a background of working in the community and a focus to piggyback off that group as the potential for leading adaptation planning. The second question was, or on the other side, what are the barriers to participation in community adaptation planning and action? I thought the first one was pretty important. Interviewees basically noted that communities that don't have the financial resources, or people that don't have the free time because of other commitments, or support networks, particularly people who have disabilities, whatever, they find it difficult to participate in a sustained community planning process, a formal, whatever. And so obviously there are things that have to be done to try to overcome these barriers. Secondly, leaders, people organizing these could use personal networks and social media to spread the word in the communities. But the other problem was that communities often lack the organizing skills and resources in their communities, particularly rural communities, not used to engaging in organizing these sorts of activities without some sort of external upskilling or additional resources. So that was an interesting barrier. And the third one was that basically people give little credence to adaptation planning unless they see that the ideas they come up with have some real uptake and support from external authorities. In other words, they're seen as valid and legitimate points. We also asked about alternative approaches that might be relevant to various groups. And obviously, from a Māori perspective, there are different ways of approaching planning than simply an organized day-long session. We also noted that, and that was a given and it was mentioned, we also mentioned that it's possible to shape planning around what's already happening in the community. That was an interesting insight that people were saying, look, there are families who are already doing things. There are little neighborhood groups, or there are collectives, or whatever. There are already groups, whānau, who are doing things, or groups that have formed themselves and developing great beds or whatever. Don't come in and assume that we're just going to start from scratch. Let's make use of and build on what's already going on in the community. Secondly, that climate awareness raising sometimes requires a multi-pronged approach. I think what people meant by that was, instead of a narrowly focused, say, media campaign about climate awareness, climate raising, there are all sorts of different ways to get people's attention. And building on that, there were several examples that people came back with of, like, beach gatherings in Muriwai was one example where they were out. It was a community gathering, they used that to piggyback and raise climate issues in getting the rangatai out with their families on a beach, family beach day. And finally, employ diverse outreach methods, obviously online techniques, communication technology, and so on, can be very useful, particularly where we've got disadvantaged communities or communities of disability. Improving support so communities can access necessary information, skills, and resources. The emphasis was on when they need them. First of all, interviewees emphasized the importance of trusting that communities know their local situation pretty well. In fact, they typically know them better than anybody else, and with appropriate upskilling and resources can lead their own planning process. We were talking out in the hall, I'll just mention this briefly, communities often don't know what they don't know. And on the other hand, when they get a flood of information, which is available from NIWA or whatever, how do they cope with that? So it's a drought of information and then a flood of information. What information is appropriate? You go up the coast and you talk about slash or whatever. And yeah, there are different types of information. information, how to handle that in the planning process. So that's one point. Second suggestion from the interviews was schedule regular engagement opportunities, particularly with council. And the point there that was coming through was instead of having the odd consultation when something urgent comes up, the suggestion was that ways of scheduling regular engagement opportunities with council, regular hui, regular, basically just familiarization and getting to know the communities was the suggestion, to establish an ongoing working relationship. And thirdly, improve information sharing and cooperation among the stakeholders, council and others, so that when it comes to particularly region-wide adaptation, we've got better bang for our buck, and communities can engage more effectively as well. The next point was identifying and engaging powerful corporate and individual interests. We raised that question with communities. It wasn't surprising that a lot of the interviews, it was like, you know, what are you talking about? And for me, that illustrates something from my community development background. Communities often don't think about the outside groups, interests, corporations, institutions that do play a really important role. I mean, they may be aware of, say, forestry industry when they're up the coast, but often communities don't know about those things. So it's important that communities gather information. Leaders could network and initiate community conversations, for example, about who these people are. How do we get to know them? Are they on our side or aren't they? Which is the second issue that people mentioned, of establishing mutually beneficial relationships with those corporate groups or individuals where there is a mutual alliance. And then finally, look for resources that can help identify those groups and build relationships outside the community. Resources like academics who have an interest in communities. Community developers, people with skills in public work, organizing, and communities who themselves have gone through adaptation planning. And try to learn some lessons from them. Those are resources. And then finally, how do communities get central and local government to recognize the importance of community-led adaptation planning? Well, one would be that communities should do their own homework, find out what other communities have done, as I just mentioned, acquire the basics of community adaptation planning, upskill themselves if possible. Just thinking practically, how would a rural community or a suburb get organized? And then have a go. In other words, don't wait around for the council or somebody else to show up and say, you need to do something about adaptation for climate change. It might be 10 years before something like that starts taking place. We hope not. Secondly, publicize and share local success stories. That really is the onus being placed on leaders to actually get out there and say, look, here's what we've done. Tell council about it. Tell other stakeholders. We've had a go. We've managed to get some planning on the board with regard to how we think we should adapt. And finally, establishing working partnerships with council and other stakeholders so that there's an ongoing working relationship. Well, that's the team, or part of the team, that produced these results. And the phase 2 next steps, as we'll hear in a minute, are those. Deliberative democracy exercise is moving to this phase. We've had public forums and community hui already this month, and there's been some very good feedback. One of the feedback that came through was it's nice to have researchers who show up in our community asking questions actually come back and tell us what they found and talk about their findings. So that we thought that was a useful message to convey. Second, present and discuss the report with council, which we're doing today. Thirdly, council staff will be reporting back on the 24th. That will be as I understand, your chance to respond to the first phase report, which you had. And perhaps organize one or more deliberative democracy assemblies, and hopefully then, as part of that process, accelerate community-led adaptation locally and also at the regional level. I thought I was tempted and will end with a quote from our report reminding us that even though this report focuses on community adaptation to future events and regional adaptation, Professor Catherine Hayhoe, a renowned climate scientist, has reminded us that we can't adapt our way out of the climate crisis. We need to reduce emissions, and I would add, think about transitioning to a whole new way of living in the future. It's going to be an interesting journey. I think it's going to be scary for a lot of people. I think it's going to raise people's hackles a little bit about the changes that need to be made, but this is a first step in our estimation. Anyway, I'm done. I will take any questions, by the way, of clarification. I should have mentioned at the beginning. If anything I've said, you need clarification. Otherwise, this discussion can wait. Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions. Deliberative democracy relies on sampling the population as it is. Yet, taking Muriwai, for example, it has 45% European, yet no Europeans were sampled, and the age spread, very below 5% of the under 25s, I think, were sampled. How do you explain that?
Well, yeah, I should have mentioned, and I did this in our science symposium, we didn't do a random sample survey. We would do that in the deliberative democracy exercise. And you pointed out the problem of trying to do small community interview sessions with finding data that you could use to do your sample selection. And we were blocked at that stage because we're dealing with two of the communities, rural communities, in census area units. So they're like a dot with them, as you just pointed out. So that was a problem. We couldn't use that data. So we used it as a, sorry.
Second question, why those communities? They were actually, certainly Muriwai, I can't speak for the northern one, was one of the least affected areas. Why not TK or Branson Road as an area that was severely affected?
Right. Well, all I can say is that we looked at those, at the criteria that are spelled out, and did some networking around with where we've got researchers, where we've got interested people, and it all came together to make those selections. There could have been several others. And quite frankly, we were also constrained by resources as to what we could handle. I haven't really answered your first question yet, which I think which is a good one. How come there weren't any podcasts? And I'd say, yeah, well, that was a problem. We should have had some podcasts involved, and I raised it with the team, but in the end, that was.
So, just one comment. I don't believe Muriwai is below sea level because there's nodes growing around it. And then my final question is, can we get to see what this survey cost? Because if we're going to go down this path of deliberative democracy, we want to get a bit of a handle on why.
Yeah, sure.
Can we get a result on the cost of this project?
We can certainly give you a report.
Ask your staff for that. I think the other point with the selection was we wanted to respect those communities that were still, this was happening just after the cyclones. Many of our communities are still in a massive state of disrepair and trauma, and we wanted to acknowledge that they had a very limited capacity to look after themselves, let alone participate in yet another research project. So that was part of the selection criteria. We said actually we're not going to go to those most affected communities this time. They could be surveyed in the future sometime when they're back on their feet, but that was an important consideration for us in the selection as well. I think we need to just keep moving on. We were given 30 minutes and we've got Poitu to present still, and then any other questions?
I'm just asking anyone that speak up now that I heard your boombox voice, just make sure you speak up so that the microphone in our recordings can pick you up. Thank you.
I don't think the next presenter's voices will be as deep as Terry's.
Our slides are here.
Question here, Terry. Terry, we've got a question here.
Yes. Thank you very much for the report. I found it really interesting. I will note though that the findings from the disability community felt a bit light. And I don't know whether that's symptomatic of them being a really vulnerable community and we all need to do more work to ensure that their issues are being highlighted, or if there were issues around engagement. I just noted that it felt like both communities in Muriwai and Matakawa were deeper. I know Matakawa really well and I can understand why that's the case, but can you give any more context as to what the engagement was around the disability community?
I think you're right. I think one of the challenges was to really find people who were comfortable about being interviewed and being engaged. I think there was some resistance. I know that the researchers working on that project, one was a social worker with the community, reported back continuously that people were interested, they thought about it, but in terms of really sitting down and being involved, there was some reluctance there. I personally didn't probe into why that was, but we just talked extensively about how to build up a group. We use networking mostly to try to get people involved. So I think it does, as you say, point to the need to reach out. And it came through in some of the comments about alternatives and ways of getting people involved. I think that the messages there implicitly were particularly referring to the disability community.
We did present back to the disability community, and there was a packed house at CCS Disability Action, so there was a lot of interest that level in the findings. But yeah, I think the researcher found it really hard to, and they were actually the community, while all of them had real issues with council responsiveness and relationships, they were the one that had the least trust in council because they felt like they've been for many, many years banging on about the needs of the disabled community and haven't had traction from this organisation. So that may have been part of the issue as well.
Whilst I completely accept that as an answer of their perspective, I'm sure that that's sort of true of almost every organisation in our region in terms of the disability sector.
I just wanted to speak up and say I'm actually really comfortable with where the focus of these of the interviews are, because if we think of the history of interviews on the East Coast, they haven't focused on Matakawa, Muriwai and our disabled people, so I'm absolutely comfortable with where they are, and also we've relied on past interviews to represent the view of everybody, which includes Matakawa, which includes Muriwai, which includes our disabled people. I enjoy the fact that there's the inverse in regards to this. What I did want to speak life to though was that I've been a huge supporter in regards to the mahi that Te Weu has done, but I would just like to maybe encourage us to have more of our local faces here the next time around, because it was the local faces and the local kōrero that got my buy-in as a councillor, and I appreciate that there's a photo in here of them. I would have loved to have seen some of them in the room, actually, and have seen some of them.
More than half of us are local, Josh.
Be the kōrero. I'm talking about, sorry, this project team in regards to the specific project, that's more my focus, which is a regional, local kind of focus. So that's my only piece of feedback in regards to this.
Just to respond to that, we did have, 10 days ago, a science symposium where we presented virtually the same thing, and we had our whole team there. So gave them a chance to reflect on their experiences for an audience. Constrained for time and whatever, so anyway, point taken.
So, sorry, yeah, and specifically the younger, browner ones of those of our of our community, who have been interviewed inside of this.
Yeah, and we ran into some really good young people. I was blown away. Anyway, you mentioned about representing the whole region and the community, and that's really the second phase we're talking about. How do we reach out now and make sense of all this and its possible implications for the entire. So maybe we'll turn it over to these guys.
Thank you.
You've got 10 minutes still.
10 minutes.
No pressure.
I apologize already from the first slide, which doesn't, June 2023, I'm Anne Bardsley, this is my colleague Christiane Allen, she should also be on there, and we know it's February 24. But we are here to talk about deliberative approaches to public engagement, our experience, and how we might be able to help here, and what it means for this region. And I was going to let Christiane do this start.
Yeah, just very quickly to contextualize this a little bit and give you a bit of background about us. So, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Christiane Allen toko ingoa, ko waipapa te matarau, no whare mahi. We work at the University of Auckland, as was explained. So who are we and what is Koitu? Koitu is the Center for Informed Futures at the university. We're a relatively new, well, a few years old now, predating certainly cyclone and other issues. But we're a research center that's really dedicated to being that interface between university-based expertise and community-based expertise and policy makers and decision makers like yourselves. And it's new, I say new because, you know, universities have traditionally not been set up this way. There's sort of that ivory tower kind of feel about them, and we try to be quite different. And where we came from was originally many of us who are at Koitu now were in the Office of the Chief Science Advisor, Sir Peter Gluckman, in the inaugural office when that first kicked off. And when that transitioned over to Juliet Gerard, many of us thought, well, you know, what were the problems that we actually could not face, could not deal with, could not sort of address in a really meaningful way while we were in that position. And those were the long-term problems that required long-term thinking, the problems that were sort of those wicked problems, you know, the problems of preparedness, of disaster risk reduction, of being ready for the next thing, and certainly the problem of climate change adaptation. And so we all know that these problems have come at us, not least you in the region, pretty thick and fast in the last few years. So there's this convergence of interests now. And one of the things that we were interested in looking at Koitu was, you know, whereas in the science advisory space, it was directly to governments and directly to decision makers. And one of the things that we know about these big, complex socio-ecological problems is that it's about communities and about communities making their own changes. And we wanted to look at what were the tools available to help do that. And this notion of deliberative decision making, which Anne will go into sort of the pillars of that, came up as a really useful tool that's been used elsewhere. But we knew that an off-the-shelf kind of way of doing this was not useful or possible in different regions. And so it's not an off-the-shelf way. It's an idea that might have started somewhere else, but when you start to really drill into it and think about it, you realize how relevant and useful. And in fact, some elements of it are certainly already in place from a cultural perspective here in Aotearoa and certainly here in Tairāwhiti. So hopefully you'll see some of that resonance as we talk you through sort of what it's about and how it can be sort of a tool in the toolkit of decision makers like yourselves.
We've already gone through that. So this is just we do have a research program called Complex Conversations where we have been developing better ways to engage the public around these complex issues and using tools of deliberative democracy. And so I'll just start off. In fact, you were still going to talk about this, what the public consultation problem is generally. There's not it's not just here, it's everywhere, that especially around these complex issues, citizens tend not to be underinformed or uninformed about the issues and might have quite top of mind views on what they think the solution is. And really, in our lives, especially in a region that's recovering from a disaster, there's not the motivation to really get into all the details on what the other side might think and why my ideas might be challenged. And also that generally resources to support really meaningful participation aren't guaranteed to most people, and the submission processes really often require a group that has some resources to be able to put a meaningful proposal into a consultation process. And conventional surveys also tend to just represent those surface impressions that people have, and often these just come from sound bites, headlines, etc. And they form their ideas in their small groups and do not really get challenged by having those conversations with people who might have different ideas. And those ideas are actually also, we know, to be a bit unstable, the things that people respond to in a survey. And we're also talking about an aggregation of individual opinions, which is not the same as a consensus on an idea. So deliberative democracy is a way of dealing with that. Did you want to do that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so without getting into a lesson in political philosophy, I mean, what you are part of, obviously, is it's a representative democracy. You've been elected to represent your constituents. The layer sits alongside that is participatory democracy, right? Where there's an opportunity for constituents to have a say and to be consulted. And there's different ways that consultation has happened traditionally in Aotearoa. So there's been, and in fact it's embedded in some legislation. RMA has consultation attached to it. And there have been other opportunities through, various levels of referenda, for instance, to have direct sort of participatory ways of citizens involved. Well, how is deliberative different? Well, deliberative is really about creating a forum that really is a microcosm of your public you represent. And Anne can get into some of the technicalities of how that forum is selected, but they're meant to look just like, they're descriptively representative of that public. And so it's a small group that participates, and they have this opportunity to learn and to think really hard and to spend time with each other and with the issues. And the idea is coming to this shared view about a decision, rather than, as Anne has said, this sort of one-off way of polling or of surveying, but to take time and to learn. And yeah, it has been used internationally. We can, if you have questions about some examples, we're happy to bring some up, but it hasn't really been put in place in Aotearoa. We have examples from Auckland that we can talk about.
Can I ask you a question which we sometimes see in our democracy, is that there might be one issue and you have a group that are really interested. I'm just looking at the word you use there, it's recruited randomly. What we sometimes find, there's a small audience that take over an issue and they overrepresent it, and then you get skewed results. How do you compensate for that in your participatory?
Well, you've really hit the nail on the head in terms of what one of the big issues is. It's that squeaky wheel, right? Or the group. It's not always a squeaky wheel. That has a negative connotation. It's also the groups that are really deeply involved in an issue, right? But that can carry it. And in this context, part of the whole kaupapa, the whole point of it, is to really go beyond those interested groups and to get a much broader view that is very descriptively representative. And we make strong efforts in designing a process so that the mini public that is created is not the
interest group,
but that those interest groups can come in
as a type of expertise to talk to that public, to let them know what it is they do. So it's not like they're left out of the process, quite the opposite. They're built right in.
They're also very important. They should just not take over the whole process. That sometimes stop other people from participating.
This is what is quite different about the process that we use.
So it's an important question.
Yeah. I mean, it is, yeah, so that is, and I'll get to the pillars of it, but that's really at the heart of it. It's not just the representation and the inclusiveness and how you get out to and create that many public, but it is also about how you deliberate and listen to different perspectives and have time to learn. So it's bringing in this expertise that may be scientific or whatever it is, or the groups that have been working on it have an interest in that whatever is being discussed. But we do use something called sortition. We sometimes call it a civic lottery to get the people involved. So you send out thousands of invitations by mail, drops, email, however, there's different ways to do that. And that should be sort of a random process, but covering as well as you can the area that you're interested in making the public for. And we have done it, and I could get into details of when we know we need to reach those communities or voices that aren't heard, we will skew our mailing so that they get more letters there and there are more people, because we're not saying you have to do it. It's not jury duty. It's saying, you know, it's an invitation. You could win the lottery. You could get selected to be a part of this important process. And you know, there is some of that. It needs to be publicized and transparent and sound interesting, like you're going to make a difference. And people who actually then agree and get selected do find that these processes are really worthwhile and they love it. But yeah, so that's a basic part of how these processes work. So the mini publics do represent the communities, the affected communities involved, and that they're providing an opportunity to learn from those different perspectives that are in the room. And it does actually, it's not, you don't use these processes for simple yes/no kind of answers, really. You're trying to avoid those choices between stark alternatives and see where we get common ground and come up with a solution. This is just more of what I've been saying, what deliberation is, looking at issues with an open mind. So we do set ground rules of how the conversations will work when people come into the room. Basically, getting down to this, the design principles. First being that it's representative and inclusive, and that it's informed. And informed not just by people's own perspectives that they're bringing into the room and that they don't necessarily listen to or have the opportunity to have a conversation with someone who thinks quite differently from themselves, and how you provide your justification. So that's the time for reason discussion and learning. And often these processes are around building a consensus by finding that common ground. So consensus does not mean that everyone agrees with a certain point of view and you've got 100% that we're for one thing. I can explain that process too, but you're coming to the idea is to come to a point of a set of recommendations that the majority of people in the room, and we set it at 80% of that group, has to at least live with these recommendations. And there is room for minority reports so that their voices are still there. That if you feel strongly about something that did not become a recommendation, that can be included in a minority report. So practically, some of those ground rules are about reciprocity. And it's true, like when you talk about an interest group that might push a certain idea and other people may disagree, we do owe each other a justification for those decisions that are made collectively, even if you might not agree. And these processes can help with that. So that is that the aim is seeking agreement on the basis of principles that can be justified to others in a transparent way. So it relies on mutual respect, that everybody in the room has a voice, we're political equals in the room, and you've got to be open-minded enough to think that you might change your mind if you listen to other people. So those are the principles, and they reflect kaupapa and tikanga. So this is not, I would emphasize that this is something that happens in Hui, I think, all the time, and we call it deliberative democracy, but those principles that I think we can draw on are really important and what make it really even more localized.
No, I mean, I think this is also, I mean, you could probably hear that although we are New Zealanders, you're hearing 3 accents from that were not originating here. And I think that one of the things that I think about a lot as a Canadian-born New Zealander is the opportunity that's here to look at doing things in new ways and to look at where there is that common ground that is actually so distinctive in Aotearoa. And so, yeah, we thought that this is a really we've been working with whenua in Auckland to develop the process there and really instilling some of the Te Ao Māori, not just Te Ao Māori, but the Mātauranga and Mātauranga-a-Hapu as well, the really truly localized kind of work in these processes. So, and they were quick to show us and to remind us how there is some synergy that underlines this.
Could I just go back to phase 1 and just clarify that 2 points that I think you would make. One is that the reason we did phase 1 was to gather some information about what the thinking is out there in the community about a particular issue, about how council can engage with and encourage and strengthen communities. So we've got feedback that could go into a citizen assembly like this for them as part of their deliberation. And we would want the people who have done the research, and maybe even representatives from the communities, to be part of that presentation to the group. Secondly, implicit in that was, it depends on what the focus of question is that the assembly is being charged with. And in our case, we initially thought about this issue about how can council better strengthen community-led planning and adaptation. That's a draft question. It's open to deliberation further, as you guys mentioned before in our discussion. So just to make those points of clarification, it's open slather at this point, and a lot of deliberation has to go on yet.
So we're at this point of phase 1 moving into phase 2. Yesterday there was a workshop with council staff with to interview representatives just to start some of those discussions about what the future direction might look like for phase 2 and what sort of a focus a citizens assembly might have in our region. Key considerations were how might this be complementary as opposed to another layer on what is already a busy workload for council and communities and their ability to respond. So there's some scoping about where this approach will be most beneficial. You know, the conversation evolved, and the next steps in your report on 178 sort of set out what's likely to happen. So you've council staff will be providing more of a response to phase 1. There will be further workshops. We're wanting this to be a co-designed approach to what this civic assembly might look like in our region, and then there needs to be an appropriate, also an appropriate approach to communities that to make sure they're willing and wanting to take part in this sort of deliberative process. So next steps are evolving. This was about just to give you a really good heads up of where we're up to. Conscious of time, but if there are any questions, please sing out.
In determining that the group is representative of the broader community, you can obviously capture ethnicity or people's identification, disability, outwardly presentable stuff. This is going to sound a really raw question, but how do you account for different intellectual ability? Like, do you actually say we want someone on this end of the spectrum and someone on that end of the spectrum and 47% in between, or how do you do that?
It really, I mean, anything is possible in a large assembly, you know, and with a smaller one, it is harder the more boxes you want to fill. But we haven't ever done that as far as the abilities. You know, we just what is there in the community should be representative. If you, I mean, we have done disability, but there's a lot of ways to define that. You know, is it physical? Is it, you know? So
it has come up. I mean, well, first of all, in terms of knowledge and educational, I want to distinguish these.
Comprehension and cognitive ability.
Sure. So
we use that, and we have for most of ours about education level,
which is one of the basic demographics that we try to mix in for sure. But it has come up in one of the Auckland ones, the transport one, talking about neurodiversity and disabilities that are unseen as well. And so there's a process that happens. So Anne had mentioned, you know, people get invited, all of them go out, people can then proactively express their interest, and then based on that goes through this algorithm of what kind of demographic buckets we want to be able to fill, and then a final subsequent process that actually talks to people and interviews and says, you know, this is what will be expected, this is what we need, does this sound all right with you, how can we help you, and how can we best help you to be part of this process.
In line with Councillor Robinson's line of questioning, because I grew up in the hood, right, and I still associate with a lot of hoodlums, and I think about their ability to be able to participate in something like this, not only from, because I heard you in regards to school qualification, heaps of them are smart, but didn't get any qualified at school. But also when we're talking about the democracy barriers and the systemic barriers for somebody who grew up in the same area as me to engage, add on the layer of that, and I'm an academic myself, and I love academia, but add that layer on top, I guess it gives me a deeper understanding of how disenfranchised my people are from that. How would you?
So that's the recruitment techniques, and this is where, you know, I mean, that probably some of you in the room have expertise in community development and community organizing, and so making sure that that advertising, that it's, you know, whether it's a letter drop campaign, whether it's a poster with a QR code, whatever it is, or some speakers, you know, some rangatahi that go out and talk to people and say, you can get involved, here it is, express your interest. But make sure that it's done in a way that those communities find approachable and accessible. So there's that whole process of recruitment that needs to happen and needs to be really well aligned with where communities are at.
But it's also, I think you might be asking about how their ability to participate once they're in the, or
how do you even get them to think about participation? Because a letter drop's not going to work.
No, there'll be different.
Those kinds of
There'll
things.
be all different approaches.
But when you're able to crack that nut, the contribution that is made there, you know, makes people who don't have access to those minds is amazing.
Yeah.
So I've again, in principle, I do agree with this style of democracy and engaging our community. I did agree with the participatory stuff. It's just then once you kind of come down, like all things like this democratic
They get
process.
paid as well, like you fellas, so that helps.
Yeah, their time is
paid,
worth,
and we
is worth something. So they get paid. They get helped if they need childcare, if they need transportation, if they need.
Yeah. It's not the pay. It's not the pay that's the barrier for gang kids participating in things like this, right? So I was
Mine's not so much a question. I do share Councillor Wharehinga's kōrero about these voices specifically, the Māori voices of Muriwai, Matakawa, and the disabled community are definitely voices that aren't regularly heard in this forum or even brought to light in council. So I just wanted to acknowledge what he said, but I also wanted to, because maybe I missed it because I had both councillors asking, but I believe that after reading it that the actual conducting of the interview and the process that happened within the community were locally led, that there were people from within those communities, so that makes a difference. So when I'm in Kaiti, I interact differently with my Kaiti community than I do with my Waihiriri community and I do with my Uawa community. And I know that there's certain people within that community to have the ability to be able to go out and have deeper and more meaningful conversations with people just because the members of that community know and trust this person. So that's what I got from reading that was what happened. That's how this information came back from Muriwai, how it came back from Matakawa, and then with our social worker and someone else who were within the disabled community. So I definitely get that. What I would like to see happen from this point forward is that, because I really enjoyed reading the report, and I don't want the report to sit over there in silo. I would really love for the report to be able to be implemented to inform not just climate change issues, but it also gives voices to our disabled community in areas of infrastructure, active communities, and a lot of other different papers that come across our table. So it's a lot bigger resource than just climate change. It gives us voices in a lot of different areas that, and I think that the point of any of the things we do, the infrastructure, the climate change, like there has to be a level of, and I, for want of a better word, of how we holistically look at it, that each of these things all affect each other. And so the report itself, if it just sits over there in the climate change basket and isn't considered within sprinklings of the other baskets that we have to cover, then it's a waste of a resource. So I would really like to emphasise that, and I know it's a noting report and I'd like to move it. Kia ora.
Thank you. Rowenia.
Yeah, I'm happy to second. I just have a question in terms of the koitu and deliberative democracy. Really appreciate the presentation, also appreciate some of this feedback. I know more people would participate meaningfully if they had the means to do so. Childcare is a huge thing, as I well know. I had to bring my baby to council last week. So that's a big thing, and I think especially in small communities where the same people do everything, there's a lot of pressures. Anyway, my question or thought, in this koitu, Greg, are there Māori involved? Because kaupapa Māori, I like it when it's used as, and I like it when it's used as an approach, but in order for that to be genuine, it needs to have feedback and participation and leadership from Māori who understand what those words mean, because the English translation makes sense to you.
Yeah.
The Māori word means something different to us. So that was just one thing I wanted to get clarity on.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that question. It's, I mean, we take it obviously very seriously. Koitu, just another bit of background on that. So the development of the centre, and in fact the name itself, which was gifted to us by Mana Whenua at the University of Auckland by Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei, was really, it was co-developed in that space. We draw a lot of lessons shared with us by them, but also by our Karakia Charles Royal, who himself is an academic of democratic discussions too. So he has an academic interest in this as our sort of guidance in that space. But we also recognize that most important, and you've pointed it out, is like the really localized way of doing this. And so every time one of these processes is put in place, it can't be done without co-development with the mana whenua, whether it's an iwi, whether it's a hapu, hapu by hapu, where it's taking place. That's fundamental. And so that's why, and it may be that some of that isn't explicit, and perhaps we shouldn't take for granted so much that we should say that more often, but absolutely that's where it starts. And so these processes have this level of governance to them, where there's the question that's asked, that's co-developed with communities, and then there's this layer of sort of random selection representation, and then it goes back to that governance layer, which is done with communities and mana whenua in the area.
Probably helpful just to say that Koitu is not going to run the process. They're here as...
Oh, no, I understand that. I meant in terms of, like, your own kaupapa and your own things, and for us all to think about how we do that, how we do deliberative democracy for ourselves, if that's the methodology.
Ali can talk about next steps with design workshops and things that land.
I thought I'd comment and answer to one thing. In Ireland, I believe the Prime Minister invites you to be part of the process. Right. And so there's a huge kudos related to being a representative community. Any improvement on our current democracy has got to be good. The area that worries me is deliberative versus manipulative. And the guard against that is having a pure sample that represents and the unbiasedness of the facilitator. And to me, that's the two key areas for it to work properly.
Yeah, those are all really good points, and I think that in designing it, in being very careful and deliberate about how it's designed, I think that that's really the piece that addresses your concerns. But I think you're right. Yeah. And the Irish process, yes, it took them a while, but they got to where it's elevated exactly to that, where when you get your letter, it's from the PM. So it's a big deal there. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your awesome feedback, and as we said, there'll be a follow-up report next month. This is about our region, our community, designing this. Koitua advisors, and we will take on board the feedback you've given today as we move forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for the input. It's really appreciated, because I think all of us over time, everywhere we start losing connection with people. They want to engage in different ways, they want to be heard in their own way, or they want to be left alone. And I think over time, especially in local government and government, we need to fine-tune again, or find ways that are really relevant and future-proofed, so that we can make sure those voices are heard. So I'm excited about how we move forward and see what it brings our way. So thank you so much for your time. Kia ora. I might just chair the rest of the meeting from this comfortable position. It's quite relaxing over here. That was great. Thank you, my friend.
I only did half our presentation.
That's good. No, but I thought sitting back and just relaxing. Thank you for your time. That's fantastic. Thank you for taking.
We're keen to have a bit of a workshop with councillors and council staff separately in the next month or two to get into it a bit more for anyone that's interested.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
We might need a public forum as well to educate the public.
Okay. It was moved by. Oh, what happened to my council? I might move back.
So,
okay, so it was moved by. It's been paid for. Quorum in the room?
we don't. We would. We've got. They're off.
Yes.
This was $1 million, and some of it went towards trying this deliberative democracy.
1, 2, 3.
There's 5.
Not a quorum.
Around the well, obviously it started before.
Oh, it's serious.
It's really
serious
good.
money sitting in this room.
It wasn't more than $1 million to do this, and seriously, it was a really good way.
Okay, are we back?
Oh, I went to the toilet, did everybody?
Everyone left.
Everyone left. Compared with how it's going.
That was it, hey? The drawing power.
Sorry, Mum.
Okay, so councillors, what we still have is a Seabed survey and a Milu update. Is that us?
Yep.
And then, good, it's all online. So I'm just going to move on. It was moved by Councillor Ria and seconded by Councillor Parata. All in favour?
Aye.
Contrary, carried. Okay, Joe, so we're over in your hand, you and Yannick, for our next two reports, and we'll take it from there.
Someone online is going to share the.
Thank you. So Joe will lead this.
There's been some work underway in Tūranganui-a-Kiwa Poverty Bay with a Seabed survey, not undertaken by us, but on behalf of LINZ, Toitu Te Whenua Land Information New Zealand. So we thought it would just be good for the council to receive a brief update on that work and the kind of results and data that's coming through that can be used in a multitude of ways, not just by Land Information New Zealand. So I'll hand over, it looks like we've got Bradley Cooper online, so I'll let him introduce himself and just give you a brief update on the work that they've been doing in our region.
Kia ora all, can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
That's great. Tēnā tātou katoa, ko Brad Tukuinga, ko Takatimu, te moanga, ko Makarewa, te awa, no Waihopai, aho. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So thank you for your time today. So as alluded to, thank you for the introduction. Here to tell you about the Seabed survey we've got underway. So I'll just quickly share my screen. You should see a PowerPoint if all goes to plan. And with the magic button, I'll hit F5 and get to the slides. So just confirming you see a PowerPoint screen.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good. So I've titled this presentation Hydrography, Powering Science and Regional Development. And yeah, as mentioned earlier, my name is Brad Cooper, and my role at Toitu Te Whenua Land Information New Zealand is Senior Hydrographic Surveyor, and we've just had our roles changed to Geospatial Specialist, as you see in the email signatures. That's perhaps why, but it's my vocation. So a bit about the organisation, Toitu Te Whenua. It comes with the proverb, people come and go, but the land remains. As an organisation, Toitu Te Whenua Land Information New Zealand is very much involved in understanding and preserving the way in which we understand the land. And so a bit about Toitu Te Whenua, we've got, so land is very central to New Zealand's Aotearoa's economic growth. And we want to make sure we've got the most accurate information about things. The boundaries, from cadastral survey boundaries to the geodetics, understanding how the land is moving, and then going down as far as topographic and hydrographic information. And so we've got a lot of work going on across the organisation, which works around that. So there's some of our main outcomes. So obviously, you guys are probably quite aware of the fact that Toitu Te Whenua LINZ is involved in managing the world-class property system that we manage. But where I'm going to talk to you today is about the high-value geographic and property information that we're currently working on with the New Zealand Hydrographic Authority. So the New Zealand Hydrographic Authority, confusingly enough, sits within Land Information New Zealand. It used to be within the Navy, but it's been within LINZ for the last 20 years. So we're responsible for safety navigation and promulgation of nautical charts and navigation products across this area that you see highlighted in front of you. So New Zealand, extending all the way down to Antarctica, to the Ross Sea, and then supporting some of our old Dominion countries in the Pacific, such as Tonga, Tokelau, Niue, and Cook Islands. Forgive me if I missed one out. I think there's Samoa in there too. So yeah, large area and large area that we produce these nautical products for. And so why do we do surveys? So New Zealand has obligations under SOLAS, and that's why we've been assigned our area of influence, I guess, area of responsibility. Article 5 of SOLAS says that we have to produce nautical products, and to support those nautical products, we have to do surveys, hydrographic surveys to support them. So how do we go about deciding where we do those surveys? We look at shipping patterns. So what you see in front of you is 1 year of shipping data between 2018 and 2019. This is from the AIS systems, so it only really covers the very large ships. So all your cargo ships and stuff like that won't cover recreational vessels. They don't tend to carry AIS or have them turned on. And if they do, they're usually Class B systems, so not reflected in the graphic here. That's something we understand and keep in mind. So yeah, when we're coordinating a survey approach, it makes sense to look at historic traffic patterns and make decisions based on that. And from that, and about 40 other layers that we add into a bit of a risk model, we can use our GIS and come up with a pattern of risk. So this is a best practice international way of sort of looking at hydrographic risk. So you know, what risk is there to shipping if charts aren't updated? This is your local area and the risk pattern that we saw when we ran the last risk assessment. So pockets of high risk, and leads to why we need to go and survey there. And so these areas we fit into a document that we make available on our website. It's called HighPlan. It shows a prioritisation of our long-term survey program. We've been running that since 2017. And so on the left there, it shows the a polygon of the region we're sort of targeting. That's what we sort of signalled when we published HighPlan. What we ended up on with the most recent survey is surveying the areas on the screen in front of you. So we went out to stakeholders. One stakeholder was DOC, and there was several other iwi groups consulted, and we got a bit of input on what those survey areas are. So if anything, we expanded the survey areas, which is great. We're able to sort of capture the extra interests of others. But you'll see that the original area is still relatively intact. So how do we go about doing these surveys? So at LINZ, we don't do the surveys ourselves, we commission them. We have supply panels, so private companies who go and do the surveys for us. So in this case, we engaged a Tauranga-based survey company called Discovery Marine Limited. And these guys have a long track record of delivering surveys for LINZ. They've been on our panel for the last 6 years, and before that they had a very strong track record of doing surveys, doing it quite a while, and doing a good job, so that's why we get them. So the way we did the surveys, so it's primarily using sonar technology. These boats send out a fan of sound waves out to the side, so about 500 times more beams than your average recreational fish finder. So very high-tech bits of equipment. And for the survey, DML employed 2 vessels to do the job. So it's a case of horses for courses. Offshore, they use the larger vessels. Inshore, they use the smaller vessels for various reasons. Offshore, you get more swell, and you need a bigger vessel to sort of deal with that. Also makes conditions better for people working on board. So two phases done 2 years apart. I probably should have mentioned that. One phase was actually done just after Cyclone Gabrielle. Also just before Cyclone Gabrielle. The next phase was done just recently at the end of last year, November last year. Obviously merging the 2 data sets will show us perhaps some differences between those 2 cyclones, perhaps present a challenge when it comes to combining those data sets. But this is the preliminary coverage we got from both the vessels. So as you can see, we surveyed a lot of the areas that we intended to. We had some prioritised some of those areas. The priority 1s, 2s and 3s sort of all got done. However, some of the priority 4 down to the south we didn't quite get around to. Just ran out of time, ran out of budget. So yeah, we will be making that. So we give our contractors DML quite a long time to deliver this data. We give them a very, very long time. Actually, they stopped data collection in November, and we're giving them until May, June to submit the deliverables. And after that, we check them, and we expect in July of this year to have the data available. And the plan will be to publish a generalized data set, so a 5-meter resolution data set on the LINS data service of that bathymetry. However, we make that the whole data set openly available for everyone to use. Just a bit of an example on some of the things that were found during the survey. There was a old dredge. The karua was scuttled not far from Young Neck's Head. That we're able to locate down the seabed. Interestingly enough, the last survey in 1950, using very old technology, picked up the top of this. We suspect what happened is since between the two surveys is that the thing fell on its side. And so the sonar image that you see on the right there shows in quite high detail the thing on its side, but quite a bit deeper than what was found in 1950. So it's always nice when the seabed gets deeper. Makes it a lot safer for shipping. But we know a lot more certainly what's down there now. And the other wreck we were quite surprised to find, quite surprised because I'm not a local, but as I understand, lots of locals know about the wreck of the Star of Canada. I understand the wheelhouse is located not far from the council chambers in the museum, the old wheelhouse. So yeah, a bit of a surprise to find it. It's obviously it's quite close to the shore, so it's not really a navigational hazard. It sits in quite shallow water, but you're surprised to us, and yeah, great to get it in such high detail with the sonar data. On this slide here, I'm just showing you the sort of change through time of the chart products. So we've gone from the old charts to a modern day paper chart, and it fades correctly into an electronic chart. So these are the last two sort of slides you saw there were the two sorts of products we'll be updating with a bit more of a focus on electronics, because that's where the world's going to. So as alluded to in the introduction, there's a lot more to these surveys than just the depths or the bathymetry, as we like to say in science speak. We can also extract a lot more data out of this sonar data, so we can get the backscatter, so that's the return intensity, and we're also getting a return through the water column of what's through the water column when we do these surveys. So it's a bit like when you look up the screen on a boat, it's a bit like an ultrasound scan, because it is a sound wave, and it's just not as high frequency. As a hydrographic office, we're responsible for producing nautical charts and improving the depths and making sure it's all really nice and accurate for safe shipping. However, the marine science community and others really benefit from this data, so we acknowledge that, and we try to get as much of that data when we're out there as we possibly can. So as a default, we're recording all these data sets, we make them available, and yeah, we like to broadcast its use. Hence the reason why I've given this presentation today. And this is just another slide sort of showing some of the extra data sets we get. We take these things called sound velocity profiles. We do that to calibrate our sensors, but that's a wealth of information to marine scientists. They get a profile of sound velocity, temperature, and salinity through the water column. So it really allows that deep understanding of the marine environment. The other information we like to get is the glamorous data set of seabed samples. So as the name suggests, we go around, we take grab samples of the seabed. They're very small, so there's very limited environmental impact, but I guess there's a greater positive environmental impact because we're able to pass this data along to marine scientists and give them a good understanding of what's down there. We use it from a navigational thing to test anchor holding capabilities. That's why we do it and portray the information on charts. However, for marine scientists, it's, yeah, like I said, it's huge wealth of information. With the backscatter and this information, you can start to infer over large areas what the seabed's doing. So we do these discrete little samples, but with the backscatter, you can sort of say, okay, if that's that sort of intensity, and I've got this sample here, then the rest of the area might be as well. So really powerful when you start to extrapolate these data sets across a wider area. And this is just a good graphic that we made up a few years back. So there's a lot more data sets we can get from hydrography than just bathymetry. And if we go to the next slide, so I'm just going to show through some examples of where we've worked together with councils and other organisations in the past. So just going to show you an example, Queen Charlotte Sound. So we partnered up with Marlborough District Council here. That enabled us to target a few more areas, expand the scope quite a bit. Obviously, Lynn's is more focused around Tory Channel and sort of where the ferry goes. So I were able to map the whole sounds in partnership with Marlborough District Council. And Niwa was able to take this data and produce these really nice web maps showing the impacts of marine farming and allowing a really deep understanding of what's actually going on beneath the surface in the Marlborough Sounds, in particular Queen Charlotte Sound. So yeah, after that there was a whole lot of there's big web maps produced, but a whole lot of portfolios and scientific studies have been done using this data, and yeah, all good stuff coming from hydrography. This slide here just shows the backscatter data of the same area, so that's the return intensity of the sonar sensor. And this one here is the Seabed classification, so taking those samples and extrapolating that across a wider area to sort of see what the seabed is made of. So you're able to build these very powerful maps. And this one here just shows the high concentrations of kelp. So that was detected from that water column data. So sort of making samples of that water column data and plotting them. You're able to understand the distribution of kelp across the whole sound. So yeah, once again, many uses. And another example, more recently, we partnered up with ECAN, and ECAN's got has a huge interest, obviously, in the Banks Peninsula area, but also more recently with the closing of Lyttelton port to cruise ships. They've been coming into Akaroa Harbour and anchoring there. So understanding the impacts of that is one of the motivators for ECAN. And of course, with Lynn's, we had our high plan priorities to go and survey there as well. So a good chance to partner up and get a wealth of information. Also, Doc was quite keen to understand what was going on there. So there's a baited underwater video. So I guess adding another layer of data there, so the bathymetry to understand marine habitat and yeah, grow it into a really powerful data set. I really can't remember what the different coloured dots are. There's different types of underwater cameras and underwater videos, towed sensors, but that's all the sites that Doc was able to go out and ground truth on. So a really rich data set in its own right, but when you combine it with all the other ones, it makes for a very powerful marine habitat data set that could be used for management of the area and conservation. So now I'm just going to hopefully run a promo vid. I just realised I might need to stop and re-share my screen again because I don't think I shared sound. Bear with me a second. Do this with computer sound and it should work better. So hopefully this works.
Below the surface of the ocean lies a fascinating terrain of hills and valleys, reefs, shoals and wrecks. Just as on land, people navigating our complex coastal waters need accurate maps to guide them safely to their destination. Aotearoa New Zealand has international obligations concerning the safety of life at sea. Providing accurate, up-to-date nautical charts is an important way to meet this obligation. Toitū Te Whenua Land Information New Zealand is the government agency responsible for providing navigational products and services that support safe shipping. Data used to update nautical charts is gathered through hydrographic surveys that look under the water to map the seabed. We can do this from space using satellites, from the air with laser beams, or from the water using echo sounders. These technologies send out beams of light or waves of sound that bounce off objects and bring back information about the depth of the water and the shape of the seabed. As satellites, aircraft, or boats pass over an area, they collect millions of points of data to slowly build up a picture of the shape and nature of the seabed. This is known as bathymetric data. These technologies give us a super clear picture of the sea floor. We describe this as 100% coverage. The result is a detailed and accurate 3D map showing the shape of the seafloor and all of its features, as if the water was not there. New shapes emerge and new hazards are revealed, so the nautical charts can be updated, making navigation safer. During echo sounding, we also collect data that can help researchers better understand the marine environment. For example, sound waves also reflect off objects in the water, like kelp and other sea life, giving us more information about the marine ecosystem. Signals reflecting off the sea floor, called backscatter, can also show how hard or soft the surface is. This type of information helps with better marine habitat management. By partnering with others, we can support their work. The data we gather through our seabed mapping program helps to guide decisions by councils, government agencies, iwi, businesses, and many others. It is used in flood mitigation planning, conservation work, for decisions on aquaculture development, and to understand, monitor, and manage the marine environment. Our hydrographic survey program, HyPlan, looks 5 to 10 years into the future and drives our ongoing work to make navigating the waters of Aotearoa as safe as possible.
Right. I guess that concludes things. Hopefully that sound came through all right for you guys, and hopefully that video explained things better than I did. It's been well sanctioned by comms and probably tells a better story than I do. So yeah, in summary, all this data will become available in the coming months, and yeah, so look forward to seeing what it could do in your neck of the woods. You know, what marine scientists can do with it. We'll certainly use it to update the nautical charts, but there's potential for it to be used for a lot wider uses. Just a bit of a shout out as well to Paul and Izzy, the coastal science team within your organisation. They've been very, very good to talk to, very good to deal with, and also thank you for letting us use your council chambers for an open day we had back in November. From memory, that was quite well received, so appreciate the support received from your organisation. Any questions?
Thank you for that, Bradley. We've got a few questions here from councillors. We're going to start with Councillor Alder and then we'll go to Councillor Foster. Thank you.
Bradley. Could you hook us up with a new fishing rock? My email is...
Salty dog.
Seriously, I believe after Gabriel, there was quite a lack of wood in the water column and on the bottom. Am I correct?
I actually haven't seen the data, but I'd imagine the sand shifted quite a bit with Gabriel. I'm actually waiting to hear from our contractors just how they deal with it, because I reckon it'd be a bit of change in depth, and there was a bit of overlap between the two areas, so between the two vessels, so that they should get a bit of an understanding of what's happened there. But yeah, in terms of where logs have moved, hard to say.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, that was one of my questions. I suspect there's a lot of woody debris and huge logs under in Poverty Bay and Tūranganui-a-Kiwa out there, and which could be mobilised by the next huge southerly swell back onto our beaches again. We've been inundated with woody debris and logs for the last.
Yeah. The sonar will pick it up if it is down there. These quite shallow waters, and we can resolve targets in the water column and the water on the seabed that are quite small. So we should see all that stuff. I must admit, I was worried sending boats into the area from a health and safety standpoint. Floating logs is something we hear lots about at the charting office just off Gisborne. So thankfully, no reported incidents of vessels hitting logs on our survey, which is always good.
How long will it be before we expect that information to come through?
So our metric is we have to have the charts updated 12 months after we receive the data. So 12 months from June, July is when the clock will start. However, we've got a mechanism called Notice to Mariners, where we can update things a bit sooner if they're more urgent. So if there's anything very, very pressing, we can publish onto the chart within the space of a few weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Pahuruhuriwai.
Kia ora, Bradley. Thanks for that. That was really interesting. I just had a question about, so that was quite scary seeing how many shipping things we had going on. Is this information able to be used to measure the impact on marine life? Like the whale strandings and all of that type of thing. Is that information that can be extracted from what you guys are gathering?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm no marine biologist. My specialty is a hydrographic surveyor, so mapping what's down there. But it is one of the data sets that can contribute to that. Okay. Like my imagination is only so limited. I imagine that in some shape or form, this data will help understand what's going on there. It might be only a small part of that puzzle, though.
Thank you.
Bradley, thank you very much, and thank you also for working closely with our staff. We look forward to ongoing work in what we do and what we use the information for. It's really interesting. It felt like a Titanic search when you showed some of those seabed stuff, but it's a very interesting piece of work, and it will help us make decisions moving forward and stay current with what our area looks like and how it's affected by events and how the landscape changed. So thank you very much for your presentation today. Much appreciated.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Councillors, I take you to page 221. That is just a noting report. I'm happy to move that. Seconded by Councillor Foster. All in favour. Contrary, carried. Last report for today. Milu, forestry plan change, forestry consent conditions. Thank you, Yannick. It's a noting report letting us know how our teams are working, what's happening on the ground. Joe and I have had some catch up about that. I'm trying to think you and I were on a Zoom with someone. Oh, it was the Environmental Defence Society, and this is where I got my update. But it's just good for councillors to know the forestry plan change, what we're going to do, when we're going to workshop with councillors, and how it's going. Yannick, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. Kia ora tātou, great to see you again. It's a fraud exercise going last after a very interesting item and very close to lunch, no less. So I won't keep you up. But what I will do is just very quickly speak to the plan change work we're doing, and specifically the work that we've got on right now. So there are two really interesting things that we're doing. One is we are collaborating with the Eastland Wood Council and its membership to work on what we're calling an alternative compliance pathway. What this involves is sitting down to focus on an all-of-forestry life cycle approach to managing forestry activities within a catchment context. When we last met in September last year, we committed to this approach and we committed to looking at the Uawa catchment as a first step. Now, what this involves is basically looking at best practice forestry activities and applying it to the catchment context. And so working with the forestry representatives, tangata whenua and the community to say, okay, what does it look like in this catchment context over the next 30 years? What are the things that we need to be mindful of? How are we going to organise the infrastructure? Where does that go? And how are the harvest activities going to be structured to minimise the effect on the receiving environment? So that's a really key part of it. And we're looking to hit the go button on that following our with the Uawa community in March. So we have a meeting that we've set for March 14, and then we'll be looking to establish a working group to progress the alternative compliance pathway for forestry activity within the Uawa catchment. The backstop for us, where compliance cannot be demonstrated to be consistent with that approach, we will also be working on default conditions around harvest activities, and that just provides us with a bit of protection and confidence that going forwards any forestry activity is going to be considered and will be managed appropriately going forwards. The other piece of work fits really nicely in with that catchment approach, and that's the land overlay 3D mapping that we're doing. Now what this is essentially using the data that was generated post-Gabrielle around landslide susceptibility and looking to identify the worst eroding land across the region. This is a really, really critical piece of work because that's actually a starting point for conversation around change and transition. So what we're looking to do is identify the worst eroding land across the region and have conversations with the forestry sector around how we transition out of forestry into more permanent and stable and sustainable vegetation. So it's actually a really interesting and exciting piece of work. And we have had an in-principle commitment to that from the forestry sector as well. We were talking about land that is fundamentally not suitable for forestry. So we're looking at that, and we'll be binding it to the work that we're doing in the Uawa catchment as well to develop, I guess, a pilot or a template for its application across Little Head. So where we are in that mapping exercise is that we have one part of the puzzle, which is the landslide susceptibility layer. So that's basically right across the region, identifying the worst eroding land in terms of erosion susceptibility. We are also developing what's called a morphometric connectivity model right now, which is connected to that layer, and it basically identifies where erosion features are able to connect to waterways. So we're interested in where erosion is generating sediment and it's getting into waterways. So we'll have that by the middle of March. We're also having a separate layer which looks at erosion within gullies. And we'll bind this all together into a bit of a super map that will start to identify the worst eroding land across the region. That's going to be the basis of the conversation. It's got a lot of potential to move us into the space of change and how we look at land use across the region. So this is very exciting. So those two pieces of work are underway at the moment. March is going to be a very busy time for us. And on the back of that work, we'll be looking to reverse the plan change by about mid-year. Thank you.
Any questions, councillors? Straightforward, we are going to be part of working groups, not working groups, the workshop, so we will be well across. Councillor Foster, thank you for your question.
Great to see this work happening, and part of the problem that we're going to be facing for the future is the sedimentation of our waterways, rivers in particular. So what are the mitigation measures for the future to make sure as those rivers rise, the water's going to rise, the land is more susceptible, where the rivers need to be flushed somehow. We used to use dredging and some old-fashioned measures, so how are we looking at mitigating that sediment in the rivers and getting rid of it? What are the solutions there?
It's a really good question, through your worship. It's a great question, first thing we're looking at is actually transition. So with that, the land that we're looking to move out of forestry and eventually farming as well, what does that transition look like into permanent vegetation? And obviously one option is actually permanent native vegetation. So actually what you're looking at across the region potentially is a re-establishment of terrestrial biodiversity.
We're going to live to start with.
Correct. And so in a catchment context, it's really, really important that you're able to have the right land uses in the right place, including permanent vegetation to attenuate storm flows. Because if you slow the water down as it migrates across the catchment, then it's not going to carry as much sediment, which means that you're not going to have the same issue within your waterways. And so that headwaters to sea approach is really, really fundamental to how we address the issue of sediment within the waterways. And then once you get that calibrated, then your flushing flows during the winter season will actually take out a lot of the sediment that has accumulated within those waterways. And so ultimately what we'd be looking for is an improvement across the catchment as a whole. But it has to be looked at as a catchment rather than just on an individual property.
Sure.
So, you know, what we're really, really excited about is binding the freshwater planning work that we're doing within catchments to the land use question that we have in play with our forestry guys at the moment. That's really, really interesting.
So there's obviously examples of how nature can flush its own self by land management and everything. And you know, because that's the concern that we've got now, is that with potential more heavy rainfall events ahead, the ability of those rivers to be able to flush urgently, so the water level isn't so critical.
Through you, Your Worship, it's probably shows a good linkage with the work that the deliberative democracy team are undertaking in terms of climate adaptation, because despite all the changes that may be made on land, there will be times when the water overtops riverbanks, and there's a question for us all about how we live with those events and whether engineering everything is the appropriate solution and the affordable solution, or whether we need to look for other ways of living with rivers. Some interesting conversations ahead.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Wharehinga and then Councillor Ria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm happy to move this paper. I only want to say two things. Looking forward to workshopping the stuff particularly around the purple land overlay 3B, and really keen on, if it's the will of the Uawa community, for those of us around this table to be at those hui, really keen on knowing about those hui for the sake of our calendars and things like that. There will be just want to be cognizant of the fact that our communities have experienced certain things. It'll be really good for us to be, I guess, energetic and present when or if the community wants us to be at those things. It could be that they don't. Just want to put that forward.
Thank you. I want to second the paper, and I just wanted to add also on to Larry's one in Warrington, where my environmental portai as well, is that it took me ages to change my thinking from sediment is the devil to actually how can I be productive with sediment. And so there's a lot of really great qualities within sediment in the event that it has to be dredged or it has to be removed from a certain area. It retains water really well, it is filled with nutrients, and before the actual area of Tūranga was developed, we were a flats of flooding, and that sediment and the natural course of it actually led to a huge Makoti kahikatea forest across the entire flats. So there are just we have to get out of that mindset of sediment is the devil and find some productive ways when actually we can utilize it to put some positive things back into our planning. Kia ora, support.
Councillor Parata.
I just sort of wanted to ask some questions around the ministerial appointees. I know that when the Milo first came out, it was a really challenging time for council, and I just want to understand, like, has that relationship with the ministerial appointees been a positive one, and has council been accommodating? And
maybe I can ask Nadine, you've had some about the appointees.
Yeah, I have, but also Joe and the team have directly been engaged. But we can say is that a lot of the work programs slowed down as a result of having to provide provide the information and meet the ministerial inquiry people's requirements.
From my perspective, yes, we have engaged positively. Whether we've seen any positive outcomes for us and our work programs, no, not yet.
Any more questions, councillors? Okay, well, I have a mover in Councillor Karakia and Councillor Ria. You can see it's nearly lunchtime here. Any more questions, councillors? If not, all in favour?
Aye.
Three carried. This is the end of our meeting. Thank you, Zita. Thank you, Winsley. Do you want to close out?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, more than happy to. I'll just close out. Whānau. Mīnoi tātou. Tātou ki a tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou āriki, great. Te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga taitanga, te wairua tau. Ake, āmini. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you. Okay, councillors,